Good evening. I believe I am here and I am live. We have Kale in the kitchen this evening. We've got a Dino Keys and we've got a Tomato Boris. And this evening we're talking all things Final Fantasy XI. So the first thing that I will actually do, if possible, is go to each one of our guests today and ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves. So, well, a little bit about their love of Final Fantasy. Does one of you have me on in the background? I feel like I just started hearing me over myself. Just checking. But good evening, everyone in chat. I hope you're all good. And if you have any questions about Final Fantasy XI that you would like to ask any of these guys here, then there is a channel points command that I believe I've made available to you. It's only 50 points, so you can chuck all of those questions in, and we will get round to them. So yes, let's start with Kale, if Kale is available for us. What is it about Final Fantasy that you love? Talk a little bit about your love of Final Fantasy for us.
All Final Fantasies?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I guess the story grabbed me for 8 when I was like 8 years old. It was on a Pizza Hut demo disc, and I was like, all right, here's Final Fantasy. This is what I'm going to experience with it. My friends all loved it, so then I had to love it, and then I just continued to love it. It was magic and swords, and, what's not to love about it, so.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Sounds like Theo also loves it as well.
No, I don't know.
Dino, would you please introduce yourself a little bit and also explain your love of Final Fantasy?
Hello, my name is also Kale. I like long walks on the beach and day drinking. I started Final Fantasy with Final Fantasy VIII, and I got really confused when I was playing through it because I kept expecting to see. I'd seen all these adverts for Final Fantasy VII, so I was looking around the whole time for a Buster Sword that didn't exist in Final Fantasy VIII, and and then just the story kept pulling me back to each game that came out, and then 11 was one that I got into really late because of it being online and having extra fees. Then eventually got it, and I'm still playing it now.
Wonderful. And lovely to meet you. Kale number 3, was that maybe?
That was me. I was
3. You were Kale 3, right. Okay, cool.
That's Kale 3.
And finally, we have Tomato.
Kale 2.
Do you want to be really specific and talk about your love of Final Fantasy XI? Just a brief overview of how you came to enjoy Final Fantasy XI for us?
I actually, similar to Dino, sort of got into it late relatively compared to its release because of fees and not really having as good internet at the time and things like that. And I found it really hard to get into back then, and I never really made much progress. So it wasn't until, a year and a half ago with Kale number 3 convinced me to play with him.
The top one.
He proceeded never to play with me ever again. And I'm still playing to this day.
Wonderful. What a wonderful tale that was.
Love how you wait till I can't talk back to call me out like that.
I timed that specifically.
So just so people at home know who aren't watching the video version and are listening to the podcast after it becomes an audio podcast, Kale is currently being full-on father figure. He is holding a baby whilst making dinner. So he's very busy with some children right now, and that is why he will pop in and out of mute. But you people watching right now on Twitch can watch it all happen live. Okay, so let's get into our first few questions for the evening. As I said to you guys at home in chat, if any of you have any questions about Final Fantasy XI, these guys should be able to answer all of them. So, I mean, at least try them, right? So just throw in a channel points. It's in the channel points, just so I've got a log of it so I can find it and I don't have to trawl through chat. And my first question is actually for Tomato. For complete noobs, could you explain how 11 differs from the majority of the Final Fantasy series?
The quickest comparison would be to literally one of sort of like saying any MMO sort of and Final Fantasy mashed together, and you'll sort of see the same features therein. You know, you've got factions and different races, and it's less about a named character and a story that you play, and it's more about you getting invested in the world yourself and being a character yourself in it. Even compared to our MMOs, though, it's very weird. There's actually a lot more similar, but it doesn't come off as being similar because of the way it's presented to you. So there's like a job system, for example, but it's a very complex job system compared to, say, some of the others, and not a lot is evidently explained to you. You have to sort of experiment to sort of see what stuff does, and yeah, that's sort of very similar, but also presented quite differently.
Okay. I wonder how many people in chat have actually played Final Fantasy XI. I might create a poll while we're here and just see. I'm very intrigued. Let's see. Have you played Final Fantasy XI? Yes. Not yet. No thanks. Let's do that. And I'll give it a good duration. Alright, so we've got a poll going. My next question is for Dino. When did you first get into Final Fantasy XI, and on what system was that?
I've never actually played Final Fantasy XI.
So helpful. Thank you, Dino.
I played on Windows XP, and it would have been between like 2004 and 2006, sometime between then. So it was a few years after it first came out, and it already had 2 of the DLC packs out. And yeah, I remember it running pretty well at the time. It used to be really slow because I'm pretty sure I still had dial-up when I first started it, and I mean the install now is still low. It's still slow. Sorry, I think it still runs on some of the original software that needed a dial-up connection, so it limits how much it can like download and upload. So, for example, back when I first played it, back in like 2004, to install it took me about a day, about 24 hours to install the whole game because it had so many updates it had to download, and then so that's downloaded them all at like 12, 15 kilobytes a second or something silly, maybe a maximum of a megabyte.
Yeah,
it was a nightmare.
I'd add that the like it's still present in the combat system. The way that it ticks over turn by turn is still like designed for dial-up. Like,
yeah, we all reinstalled it recently because there's an event on at the minute for the 20th anniversary. So there's like we can all go back in for free. And even to download the update took us all like 40 minutes each. And it was only probably a couple hundred meg. I can't think it would have been any more. And it just limits it. So we were all jumped in, and then we all had to wait forever.
That's so weird that they haven't thought to do anything with that, and they know that people are still playing the game. Right, well, my next question was actually also for Dino, and was saying, did you need good internet back then to play it? But you've kind of just answered that. I've also asked, what kind of system do you recommend people have today for it, or is it not too taxing on a PC? I'm guessing it's not too taxing on a PC.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could run it on anything now. It's made for those older systems, and they've updated things over time, but it's still, it doesn't use much system resources at all.
I have a 10-year-old laptop I'm installing it on so I can play it in other rooms other than the computer room. And it runs perfectly fine, the same as it does on my other computer. So
nice. There you go then, guys. If you are interested in Final Fantasy XI, you're pretty good no matter what you've got. My next question is for everyone, and we'll start with Tomato. What is it about 11 that makes you play it to this day?
For one, the job system. If you give me a job system, I instantly get more invested. The more I can customize my own character, the more I will want to sort of sink time into that character. And as much as this game draws some sort of stuff out, yeah, it does that in a way that you then become ultra invested. Like recently, we've obviously, as we've said, we've all reinstalled it lately for this event, and I've been watching Kale play it very briefly in the mornings, and it's instantly gotten me kind of hyped, and I've started looking up what I was doing when I last put it down, and instantly I'm like, okay, right, I need to go there to do this, and then I can go do this, and then I can do this. And there's like any MMO, there's a ton of cool stuff to keep you sort of occupied, like mounts and things like, and yeah, the story is actually really, really good.
I mean, it's quite funny, really. Before we started streaming and I was getting these guys all together, they were still playing Final Fantasy 11.
I still am now.
Before...
It's on my third one.
Before we went live, they were still playing it.
I'm looking at Dino in game. He's on a chocobo. He's running around in front of me.
You guys all multitasking like pros this evening. Dino, do you have any more to add to that? What is it that makes you play it to this day? Anything different to what Tomato said?
I think for me, a lot of it that pulled me back in recently was the nostalgia. Like because I used to live in this game. Whenever I wasn't working, I would be playing Final Fantasy 11. But it's just a huge world you can just explore, and it doesn't feel like it limits you in any sort of respect. There's no points you have to go from A to B to get anywhere. It's all open. And since I first played, they've made it a lot more accessible for people coming in. So back when I first played it, I think I probably only got to like level 40 or level 50, and the level cap was around 75. And now in each town you can just teleport anywhere in the entire game. And obviously some places are going to be way too high level for you to manage anything, but it's just open now. So yeah, I think it's just that exploration that brings me back.
Nice. And I think Kale might be a little bit too busy. So
No, I'm right here.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. Well, I mean, did you have anything extra? What about 11 makes you play it to this day?
So I really like it. Feels like a standalone Final Fantasy versus like other MMOs. I feel like Final Fantasy 14 is more like, I mean, it's very MMO but Final Fantasy, and this is very much its own game. Like it doesn't really draw on other games, and like for instance, like 14, which is there's things that are really cool about it. Like it uses some music from Final Fantasy 2 and things like that, and this is pretty much just all original soundtrack, original story. They don't pull anything in, and then it doesn't really hold your hand in any way, shape, or form, which is both a drawback and really cool at the same time. It came out like at the same time as WoW, so whereas everything kind of follows WoW's path now and makes things fun and easy and the same kind of interactivity and similar UIs and stuff like that too. 11 does not do any of that, which again at times can be frustrating, but it's really cool to see which direction that Square Enix went. And then now 14 is more of, it's awesome, it's great, but 11 still has my heart because I lived in it for such a long time. Like literally, like Dino said, it was my social life when I was in high school. I lived on Final Fantasy 11 when I wasn't at school, and even my high school friends played with me there. So
nice.
So it's home.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I guess there's probably quite a lot of nostalgia with a bunch of people playing it right now, but they're also hopefully, I mean, I believe in recent years there's been sort of a revitalization, like new people have started to be interested in 11. Maybe they tried 14 and wanted to see what 11 was like and how it differed, and that's why they've started to hype it up again, because it's what is it, their 20th anniversary right now? So
Yes, I think yesterday.
Yeah, literally,
yeah,
that's when all the tweets and things happened. And...
yeah, so it's very interesting that something like this has gone on for 20 years and people are still trying to pick it up today. Like Strife in chat has just said, I'm so close to having this game installed, set up. Jesus Christ, it's insane. And has also asked the question, please try and justify the setup / install, please.
No comment.
Wait until you get in game, Strife. You'll see how worth it is.
You should see what it took to run it on a PS2 back in the day.
Yeah, what I don't know if that was a question I've taken out or not, but what were the devices that it was actually released on?
Originally PS2 and PC. I did not have a PC that was able to play it. I had a friend who could, so I'd go over to his house and made a character on his account, ran around Ronfire. But then eventually I saved up enough money both for a used PS2 and the HDD that I got, I think, full price at Sears, of all places. And it came with the hard drive. It needed the online device that could connect to dial-up or broadband. I don't remember what it was called. So it needed the modem for the PS2 and a hard drive. And all the hard drive was for Final Fantasy XI in the US. In Japan, they used it for more. But and then on top of that, you had to pay for the monthly fee. I think the hard drive itself was like, with 11 on it, was $100, and then you had to get everything else too. So
yeah, one thing with 11 as well is like I've never played it on PS2. I've only ever played it on PC. But when it first came out on PC, it also had TetraMaster installed. So it was something that I think they wanted you to be able to do something if there was updates happening to Final Fantasy 11 and you couldn't get in server maintenance and things. And that's not a service that they provide anymore. But was that actually on the PS2, Kale, as well?
yeah, they had TetraMaster on the PS2. I would play it. I did exactly that. When Final Fantasy XI had maintenance, I would be on TetraMaster.
Is there some way we can retrofit?
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere.
I'm sure somebody has it, because it was better than, like, it was expanded on 9s. So it was 9s, but online, and it had more cards in addition to all the cards that were in there.
I remember at events around the year, they did like Final Fantasy X character cards, and they just kept adding different cards to it over time. It was really cool. And then, I was really surprised when I came back to it, and the service wasn't there anymore. But,
you still have to, like, you can still install it, but it's a worthless program.
Yeah.
For those of you in chat that may not know what they're talking about an in-game card game that was it originally Final Fantasy IX, that one? Yes.
TetraMaster was 9.
And apparently it was a thing that you could also play when you were waiting to get into a server. So that's interesting. Where are we with our questions?
What was weird about it is you couldn't wait to get into a server. You had to go into either or. So you couldn't update 11 while you did it. You had to log into TetraMaster instead of 11, and then you'd have to go to 11 to update it, just because of how ubiquitous the system is.
Okay. Kale, my next question, I've got a couple questions for you. How many different job types are there, and which ones do you typically choose?
So there are now 22 jobs. They added 2 since I stopped playing years ago. Which I just got the stuff for. You need all of the DLCs in order to access all of the jobs. My first job was Black Mage, because the Final Fantasy XI strategy guide told me that Black Mage would be a good sub-job for Summoner. That is not true. Nobody read that strategy guide. Burn it if you have it. It's worthless information, the entire thing. They made like one strategy guide. Anyway, I played Black Mage. And that became the one that I got to 75 because it was such a long haul to 75 before. And it's still my only level 75 job. But I really enjoyed Blue Mage when it came out because it is excellently done. And then Dancer is really fun too when it came out. I was waiting for it for years because they had a DAT file called dancer.enc in the updates. And I was like, one day they'll release Dancer, and then they did. And it was a healing melee class, which is awesome.
Cool. And if someone wants to play more than 2 job types, do they have to buy another account?
No. With one, everything you can do can be done on one character. You don't need a second character at all in any way, shape, or form. You have the option for multiple characters, and each account can have up to 16. But each additional character costs another $1 a month.
Ooh.
Yeah, but you don't need any. You only need the one.
Okay. So I'll now ask that question to Tomato and Dino. We'll start with Dino. What were/are your main jobs?
So the first time round, my main job that I just stuck with for ages was warrior, which is one of the first like 6 or handful of jobs that you have. And then eventually I put a sub job as red mage, and no one would want me in their party because they like I remember at the time everyone would want you to play like a certain character, like a certain job had to have a certain sub job, and you had to, similar to how modern MMOs work, they would want you to use moves in a certain order to get like the most DPS and the most healing and everything. So I mean, even now, I still don't really know who would be the best subclass for a warrior, or it would probably be the warrior would be a subclass for someone else. But yeah, I still spent so much time playing as that warrior class. And then this time round, straight away, I went back into warrior again. And then me and Tomato, we ended up unlocking quite a few different like newer jobs that they'd added. And now I'm playing as a summoner with a white mage as my sub job. So you get benefits like extra MP, and I feel like I can kind of keep a party going just about with the healing spells. But yeah, that tends to be what I do. I still haven't tried some of the jobs that are in the game. There's like Rune Fencer, I think, was a more recent one they added, and Geomancer, I think, was at the same time. So yeah, there's so many jobs. I just haven't gotten around to trying them all.
It's nice that people can try them all, though. I do like that. Tomato, what about you? What are your main jobs?
I believe back in the original day, I always wanted to play a thief, and similarly, when I first started up this, I think I did as well. It didn't prove like it's a lot more complicated than playing rogues and thieves in other MMOs. So I ended up beelining Blue Mage and Ninja, because those were the things that when I played it way back when were the latest DLC jobs kind of thing. And I never got to that point because it was so hard to get into. And I was like, I didn't know what I was doing back then. So yeah, Blue Mage Ninja is what I sort of went through the main game as. I love Blue Mages in general. It's one of my favorite classes, jobs ever, and throughout the whole series. And now I'm subbing Blue Mage Warrior just because it's quite straightforward and I can be a bit tanky, which complements playing with a summoner. Can dish out loads of damage whilst I get hit in the face.
Well, me and Tomato also created our own job class for a while, which was police. So we would just run around the towns, just screaming at people that we were going to arrest them. And the idea was to just annoy people, really. There's items you can get in the game as well that change your appearance. So, like, we'd be different animals or different monsters, I think sometimes. But there's one item that changes you into a treasure chest, like a mimic. And the only way to turn it off is to go. There's like one button on the keyboard that pulls you up to a bar at the top of the screen, and it shows you which effects you have on you. And if you click on the one that's changed your costume, it deactivates it. But like some people don't know that just out of the box. That's how it works. So I pretended to arrest someone. I gave him an item and I said, "You have to use this." And then he changed himself into a chest and was trapped. I can't. How long did we Were you there, Tomato?
I don't think I was there for the actual trapping of the person, but we met a lot of very fun people like that.
Yeah.
Like there was an event. It was one of the monthly events, and they handed out a lot of those items, like the shape change into a box, and literally a bunch of people transformed into like Malboras and different monsters, and were like auto running on a loop around this part of Windhurst Walls. And I must have spent a good 20 minutes, 30 minutes just chasing them and messing around with those guys. It was, as Dida said, it was sort of meant to annoy people, but we met nothing but
everyone
kind of
was
fun people.
up for a laugh, and like there were nights that we played where we just did that. We didn't have any other aim or goal. We would just go in to like have fun with people, and yeah, everyone just got on board with it really. But yeah, it was pretty fun.
That's nice. So do you find in general all of the people that you meet on Final Fantasy XI are nice?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone that you speak to, if they're going to speak back to you, it's polite. There's never I've never had anyone be rude to me on it. Um, I mean, it's the type of game that if somebody does find like what you're doing annoying, or if they don't, maybe if you're looking for a party and you join them and you're not doing too well, they just won't talk. That's sort of the worst case scenario. Um, but I mean, that rarely happens as well, really. I think everyone's just being, I think especially since they've started these events of existing players can come back for free and trial it. You get all these old players that come back that have that nostalgia and they just want to experience the world like it was back when it was new and we were all playing. So everyone's kind of just polite, and yeah, it's a good time.
I've not met any extreme. I'm sure they're out there, but I've not met any like any MMO will have the extreme toxic community, sort of like Dino mentioned earlier with the you need to use this sub job with this job kind of attitude because we're doing a dungeon right now. Why aren't you optimized? That kind of attitude, which
Yeah,
you will find across all MMOs. I haven't
it's
encountered that
insane
once yet.
how much that used to happen. It was absolutely insane. There's this place in Final Fantasy XI called the Dunes, and it's kind of like back before they made it easier and more accessible. That always felt like a point that where players would drop out of the game, or they would push through it and carry on and go towards the end game. And the amount of people calling for parties there, and I could heal, I could do basic healing with a red mage, but they were like, no, you have to be a white mage, and you have to have this equipment, and you have to this and this, and it just sucked the fun out of it. Like this time round, I haven't seen any of that. Yeah, I mean, apart from Tomato, he can get pretty nasty sometimes.
Sometimes Dino just doesn't equip the right job. We're running around as policemen, and
This is
he's
why I
a
have to
dancer as a sub job, and it's not ideal for what we're doing in game. It just doesn't work. We lost all of those perps, remember?
We lost a few, yeah, and it was the last day on the job.
Most of them as well. It's always the last day on the job, though, and they keep dragging us back in.
Moving on. My next question means nothing to me, but hopefully it means something to you, and it means something to some people in chat. What job did you first beat Matt on? How was it? And how many attempts did it take? Now, out of the three of you, who has beaten? Will you all have beaten Matt?
Me and Dino have Kale.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with beating the elderly. I know Kale's been pretty big on that, with Matt in particular. But yeah, me and Tomato did it at the same time, I think.
Yeah, because we both hit that point.
So, what jobs were you to beat, and how many attempts did it take?
I think 2 or 3, maybe. I think I
It
went
was
into it thinking it was going to be something else. So you go into this battle arena with, an old guy, and we'd been like following the odd guide online, like of what we needed to get to that point. So I knew it wasn't going to just be like a pushover. but he went mental and kicked my face off. So then I didn't know if I could. You get these things called trusts, which is unlockable characters that work like NPCs, but they fight with you, and you can get them all of different classes. And I can't even remember now. Are they allowed in there?
I don't think they are for Matt, which is
Right.
why there's a lot of fights because of the quantity of DLC and all of the stuff in there now. It's very easy to be like, oh, I've done a load of content that's below my level. I'm clearly just breezing through this now. And then you run into the stuff you're meant to be doing and immediately get beaten back down.
Yeah.
And yeah, Matt was one of those.
Mine wasn't too bad. When I think you have to beat him as one of your original 6 jobs first, don't you?
It just has to be anything before Ottergan.
That's yeah.
I had a bit of a weird thing because Blue Mage does it differently to everyone else for some reason.
Blue Mage is it's a really fun job, but it's really awkward for everything. So
it just does it differently. So I had to beat Matt with that, and I didn't have to do anything else, I believe. And again, 2 or 3 times. Because it was just one of those fights that you weren't expecting to be, oh, it's like that, is it, old man? I have to take you seriously.
Old man comes at you looking like he's going to punch you, and then all of a sudden he starts casting like all the highest level black magic that he can at you.
Right.
For summoner, it was a little bit, it felt like it was a little bit easier because you have your summons up. So he kind of goes for the summons that are dealing him damage, and then you can just poke him with a stick, whilst he's fighting something else. But those other jobs like warrior, anything close range and stuff, and he just keeps hitting you. It's crazy, but yeah, it was fun.
What I'm gonna sort of half do my next question. Which would be the worst jobs to try fighting Matt with?
I think Red Mage was notoriously the worst to fight him with. Because he has access to healing magic and black magic, in addition to swordplay. So you have to have you can't just focus on one strength. You have to make sure you're well-rounded enough to be able to go toe-to-toe with this man who has excellent stats and the highest skill in everything that he does. And he is a jack of all trades because he's a Red Mage. So Red Mage was the one that everybody dreaded back in the day. I don't know what it is now, but Red Mage was terrible. So I was like, I'm fighting him on Black Mage, and that's it. Because with Black Mage, you've either got I think you did it within 2 or 3 minutes, or you were done. Because Black Mage is so bursty and over that it was one of the easiest fights. So I was like, all right, never fighting him again. That's it. I don't need his stupid hat.
Yeah, there's you get unlocks as well for beating him with different jobs.
Okay.
I don't really know what they are because once I've beaten him enough that I didn't have to fight him anymore, I was like, I'm done with this man now. He can survive now. It is a pretty tough
We
fight.
still have to talk to him from time to time, though.
Yeah.
He's still involved in our current quests.
Oh, right.
And leveling and things.
But now he's your friend?
Yeah, I think so.
He's your friend that kicks you in the face sometimes, We've all got one of those. Keeps
you on your toes.
So my next question, it's another one that's for everyone, and whoever would like. I'm gonna split it a little bit. So my question is, what was your favorite zone and why? That can be plural. But first, could one of you explain the zones and how that works? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how that is a question, but you have to. Is it like a world map on a normal Final Fantasy?
If you played 14, it's kind of like 14 or like 12.
12 would be the most obvious comparison, I would say. You've got a lot of big open areas that have interconnected sections. You have to physically buy the maps if you want to be able to bring up a map of it. There are several cities which often have several exits out to several different zones. And much like any MMO, there's, this would be zone level 1 to 10 for starting out. This is at zone level 5 to 15, and so on and so forth.
Okay,
That's
so
about as straightforward as it is.
Tomato what was your favorite zone, or what is your favorite zone?
That's a really tough question, to be honest.
Would you like
Since
me to
I
pass
haven't-
to somebody else first?
Please.
Does Kale have an answer ready for us?
They do, because they're the zones that brought me into the game. I started playing around the time that Change for Mafia came out or was coming in. So I got really excited about this area called Primidian, which is like the world is decaying slowly, and so you have like what is left of the creatures and stuff that are outside, but they're decaying like inside of like this crystal world. It's really crazy. Anyway, the entire world is super cool and mirrored, and you can look up and see like land above you, and look down and see land below you, and it's one of the most gorgeous areas that you can go to that has like this dark emptiness to it. And then that same expansion also gave us Lootface Meadows. So once you clear all the Primidians, you get to go to Lootface Meadows for the first time. And that's something that I wanted to do from day one in the game, was go to this place as soon as I learned that this place existed. And that place is the first time you get to see the area from the opening cutscene. You don't get to go there, but you can walk to an area and see this like stone thing that is like, you watch it in the movie before the game, which doesn't seem like it has any relevance to you whatsoever because you never get to go to this country or hear about it. But this is the first expansion where you get to see it, and that was super cool to finally like have that come around full circle.
Yeah, that does sound really nice. Dino, what's your favorite zone?
So
Why?
before we did this call, I made notes on some of the questions, and I couldn't think of an answer for this one. I think when I originally played, I really didn't venture that far because the leveling was so hard, and I spent a lot of the time using it as like a way to talk to my friends that were playing, because we were all like, we would all just hang out in Final Fantasy 11, and I genuinely can't think of a zone that I would rate over another one. There's the surrounding area. Like I always started my characters in a town called Windurst, so you get 3 different towns to choose from. And Windurst is sort of a big open area. It's all grass and fields, and then the surrounding area, you go from that grass and fields, and there's like a lake or a small river that runs through it. You go into like a mountain range, which is, and I'm going to butcher this, Sarabaruta. Is that right?
Baruta.
Yes.
Baruta. There we go.
Sarabaru.
So I think that's the one that stands out most for me, the original time I played, because that's the place I spent the most time. And it's just kind of a big mountainous area, and there's different types of monsters. There's a good range of levels as well for monsters, so you can spend a load of time there and constantly get experience points. And then that leads on to like then another area that leads to a small like a fishing town, which then leads to it's just hard. I feel like every time I kept thinking of which zone did I like the most, I kept thinking of the zone it led on to, and I was like,
There's another one, yeah.
that was good too. And then the next one, oh yeah, that was also good. So my answer is all of them.
And Tomatoes might be as well. Is Tomatoes answer all of them?
Similar to Dino, but actually, like, I mean, I might be answering a later question here a bit, but I'm going to struggle to actually remember the names of some of the places as well that I liked the most. But yeah, it usually, the things that come to mind are actually, apart from areas where it's just that music is like the best, and you go, this is amazing. I love just walking around here because of the music and the atmosphere. There were all like bits where it felt the story was apexing. So there was a point where me and Dino were in this, I wouldn't call it a city in the sky. There was, I don't know, it's not like you can go in buildings and stuff, but like,
it was a city. It's no longer
it's like city ruins, yeah. And then there's a place that connects to that's not really a zone, but it was where we fought a boss. And it wasn't endgame. I don't think it was even the end of that DLC. But it was like, it felt like the arena you traveled through, it felt like, what was it, the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where Cloud and Sephiroth are on that like plane, and there's just like the cosmos around them. It was that kind of scale of, whoa, where are we? This is huge. It's taken so long to get to these points that those places, the Shadow Lord's castle as well, that dungeon felt like such a epic apex for me that it kind of sticks out. Even what, sorry?
The lead up with Zarkabard, and you have like the crags in the ground with like the Aurora Borealis coming out of the ground as you walk to his castle.
It's like there's a lot of areas in the game that are really mundane, but quite nice and pleasant to be in. But there are, as we've been saying, there are too many areas that are just like really cool. That are just like, you have to kind of see it and just whoa for yourself.
There's some areas that are worthless too. Like in Babiki Bay, there's a place called Porgonorgo Isle that you have to take a boat to get to, but like there's no reason for you to go there. I think except for like a mission, and otherwise it just has these really cute Mandragora that aren't anywhere else in the game really, and these weird shell creatures that have like super high defense, and you can go clamming, and that's the only place in the game where you can go clamming.
We've got Snowman in chat that said, I'm amazed at how when the game first came out, I hated going to Valkerm Dunes, but now I feel nothing but incredible nostalgia for it and love running through it. Also, Paul has said Alteu, is that how you pronounce that?
Alteu Plateau?
That's Paul's favorite.
That's C, right, Paul? I think I haven't unlocked C still, but that is like number one goal.
So yes, he said C, yes. So my next question was, what was your favorite city? And I guess Tomatoes kind of mentioned a couple cities in his response. Oh, go on.
No, instantly city was easier for me to answer because
go on.
I mean, there might be some cities I think I've visited main one. But two in particular, Juno, because it's considered a huge milestone in game, and originally it took forever to get there. And now it's sort of like this hub of significance, and it's just a really nice city. There's parts of it that really weirdly remind me of Junon, because it's on this like set of like steps, I think it is, and then there's like the High Quarter and the docks, and the other place that really sticks out to me is Alduin, but that is also because of the music, and again, getting there felt like such an achievement. And then I've got this lovely music playing. I really like Alduin as a city just to run around, and it's just, again, those two cities are great to run around in. And also honourable mention to Windurst, which is starting city at the moment.
Kale, are you frying something?
Yeah, is it loud?
I could just tell that you were frying something, but you are welcome to answer what your favorite city is right now.
Okay. My favorite starting nation, because you've got three, was Windurst. I have rank 10 in all of the nations, so I spent a lot of time in all three of them. And Windurst is the most confusing to navigate, but it has the coolest culture of all of them. And instead of being at war with their local beastmen, can't do anything about it. They try to make peace with them, and they have like peace offerings and stuff that they do with them. And so that's one of the first things that you have to do. And they have this whole like subculture of these like they're called cardigans, and they're these weird like magic created machines, automatons, that also are sentient. And some of them like rise up in the early missions to try to like become independent and not be subservient to the Windurstians anymore. But I think my favorite city of all of them is Ottergen, because I was there for the launch night of that game, or of that expansion. So I was there with everybody who first shipped over on like the first boats. We're all waiting in line just to cram into these boats to go to this place for the first time. And so I have this like very strong memory of being there and everybody trying to figure out what everything was at the same time and talking in like the area chat of like being like, I found this NPC that does this thing. And it's very big and confusing. It has these two huge areas to it. And there's one like special area that like the second area gets attacked by monsters periodically once they build up their armies. I don't know if it still goes on because every time that I check, it looks like the armies have like, they're not building up at all. But periodically they would attack, and it was terrible for the server load and for the way that the game operates. But you'd have these giant armies of all of these beastmen in town attacking, and you'd have to like rescue NPCs and stop them from dying and stuff because they would capture them. If they captured them, you'd have to then go out and rescue them to bring them back. And so like sometimes they would capture the guy that lets you teleport back to the home nations. So you'd be stuck here until somebody goes out and gets him and brings him back, and then you can teleport back, which is probably why they don't have it in the game anymore. But it was really fun to be there when it first started, and it was very, very different aesthetically than the rest of the game so far.
Snowman also remembers that and was finding that fun.
It's also where you unlock Blue Mage. Super important.
Dino, what about you? What's your favorite city and why?
So I was going to go with Windurst originally, just because the music there is my favorite in the entire game. I just, it's so relaxing. But then another place that I really like is a town called Mora, or Mahora, or I think it's Mora. And basically, you like back when I first played, I didn't have a guide. You're kind of just exploring and discovering everything as you go, and you get to this small town, and the aim is to take a boat to the next location. So you go down to the dock, and it looks similar to areas near me. I'm like right in the south of the UK, so it's like a small fishing town. And you go up to the counter, and you have to like. I feel like it made it very different to other games at that point. Usually in a video game, you go somewhere, you speak to someone, the quest is done, or you speak to someone, they send you somewhere else. But or you go through a door and it's a loading area kind of thing. Whereas this was you had to go up to the counter and pay to go on the boat, and then he lets you through a little a little space where you kind of automatically walk through, and then you're in this waiting area to get on a boat. But the boat might not be there yet, so you're stood there waiting on a dock with other people or on your own, and eventually it'll come past, park up, and you get on the boat. And in my mind, I remember thinking, okay, so once I go on the boat, a little cutscene plays, and then you appear at the next location. But the game is the boats work in sort of a real time way. So you get on the boat, and it sets off, and then you have to wait on the boat whilst it travels to the next location. So you have like a little, maybe like it feels like 10 minutes, but it's probably only 5, where you're just on this boat and it's going across the sea, and you can go fishing off the side of the boat. Some sea monsters might jump on board. You have pirates as well. It's so well put together. It just feels like a proper adventure.
It's a real world rather than
yeah. I always feel like in any other game that would just be a loading area point. Travel to this point, get on the boat, and you're there. But you have to experience all. It's really cool. So I think that town, made this game feel a lot different for me. So I would say that one. I'm not going to pronounce it again because I'm pretty sure I butchered it.
No, that's amazing. That's a really interesting thing. I had no idea that they did things like that. And like you say, in a normal game, you'd expect it to just be a loading point and a cinematic, and then you're there at the next piece. But yeah, that's really cool that they integrated that.
Yeah, I can see someone, Snowman in the chat has just said about if you're low level, you have to be careful and stay downstairs. And there would be
I died at sea.
that would just appear on the boat, and you're such a low level, and unless there's a load of higher level players there, yeah, you just have to kind of run and hide underneath, or you have to try and trick Tomato to go outside and get close to the thing. Um, things like things like that. It was really fun. So anytime you were up on the top of the boat, you didn't know what was going to happen. If you go fishing, you can fish up items or fish, but you can also hook up a sea monster, bring it on board, and it kills everyone, and everyone hates you. But then you don't play for 10 years because you're worried that everyone still hates you. Lasting memories.
So I have a question from that. So Tomato, when you die on that boat, do you just respawn on that boat? What happens?
Well, whenever you die, it doesn't matter, except I think a few occasions because of multi-dimensional shenanigans. For the most part, when you die, you've got there are crystals all over the world that these days are basically free teleport around, and you have to unlock them by sort of tagging them. So you have to unlock a place before you can freely teleport there. Each of those you can set as your home point, and that is where you will respawn 99% of the time. Is it instances you might get kicked out? And Dynamis, I think you might get kicked out.
Yeah, and you can get White Mage can do resurrection spells, so they can bring you back on the spot, and there are items as well that can do that. I'm sure maybe Red Mage has a low level res as well.
Yeah. So like many MMOs, yeah, you can choose to respawn, or you can wait around in your court on the off chance someone with the relative healing skill can.
Yeah. The only problem with that is that some of the respawn spells or items bring you back with such a low level of health that, say, if you I know that at one point me and Tomato were trying to unlock Fenrir the Summon, and he was just killing us every time. And there was a few times when Tomato would go down, so I'd resurrect him, and then Fenrir would kill me, and then Tomatoes come back with like 80 HP or something out of 900 or whatever it was,
or 1,000. Yeah.
Completely useless. So those kind of, at those points we just kind of left it and went back to the crystals. But at some places it is, the other person could take out the enemy and then you resurrect them. There's a little bit of a cooldown and then you go back to full health. So those instances make sense, but mid-battle resurrections did not help us at all.
Yeah, it felt a bit like RNG at some points, but it was also us popping the right spells. I think it might have been Fenrir, it might have been another. Basically, me and Dino had a great time. It was in part unlocking the summons, but they're also really cool storyline parts and really cool things to do. Is fight. They're not Eidolons, but avatars, yeah. And yeah, a couple of them just had a few ultra hard hitting spells or attacks that we could mitigate, but we had to prep and do things properly to do that. And I had spells that could create a damage buff that meant I had 250 odd spare HP, which didn't before my actual HP got taken out. And little things like that is using that at the right point before the enemy use their big attack, and we'd survive the battle. But if we didn't, yeah, one of us would go down, suddenly things would start to go wrong, and wow, yeah, it's good fun though.
Big scary thing if you re-raised or if you got raised or something like that and you had it was called weakness, is if you raised near any undead. So if it happened to be nighttime in the area you were in, or if you were on the boat and pirates attacked and you had low HP, they aggro low HP. So they would just attack anybody nearby who had low HP and come kill them. So if you just came back and you were like, I'm safe now, thank you for raising me, you would die again and lose 10% of your experience to the next level again.
Oh yeah,
So
that
that would be 20 experience gone, 20%.
yeah, you can de-level in the game as well by losing experience, which was a shock the first time that happened back when. Like now, it's a lot easier to get experience points. They've added a lot of systems into the game that make the game more single player friendly, and I think that was to account for the numbers of players falling over time, back from its heyday. Um, but back originally, it was so hard to grind the levels up. And I remember dying and losing a level, and I was just like, "This game hates me. Like, I can't
Devastating.
do this." Yeah.
And then recently, well, I say recently, it was quite a while ago, but we hit like the level cap, and then we unlocked the level cap, and now we're earning different types of experience. And I think it was a few months ago when we played, but I got reminded that still existed because I'd long since forgotten because it's so easy to accrue XP now. But after so long of not earning regular XP and so many deaths, I didn't realize that I'd suddenly de-leveled. I've got a all right. Give me an hour. I'll go and grind out level 99 again.
Yeah, and Paul in chat makes a really good point as well. When you lose a level, it does mean that some of your gear you've just equipped or bought, you can't wear anymore because now you're too low level to wear it. And it's only a little bit of hassle really when you've got to go back and equip your older gear. But if you're like me, when you get your new gear, you're like, well, I don't need this old rubbish stuff anymore, so I'll just sell this.
Sell.
You don't even make enough money off it selling it to a shop quickly, and then then you de-level and can't wear anything. So
And then you can't re-level because you've got no gear on.
yeah, yeah. So those are issues. Like now, a lot easier. Again, you can just quickly level back up. But originally, that would be the end of a playing session for me. That would be I need to step away now and cry.
It sounds like a really hard game. It sounds like a tough game compared to, I guess, like Kale said, it doesn't hold your hand like other games would, and it really does sound like that for a Final Fantasy. It throws you in some situations, and the de-leveling, I had no idea.
When it does feel different, like Kale was saying before. When you load it up, you get a little video at the start, and then you're in, and there's no like tutorials every couple of steps telling you what buttons do and how to fight and everything. You sort of have to figure out, but a lot of it is like you can see in the video at the minute. A lot of it is menu based, like older Final Fantasies.
Yeah.
And like how the battle system works, it does feel like a more classic Final Fantasy game where you sit there hitting commands, um, and I've completely lost my train of thought. That's fun.
Well, yes. Well, we were. It's all good. We can move on to the next question, because we were kind of Tomato was starting to hit it, which is which part of the storyline do you enjoy the most? It's probably a very difficult question to answer, but Tomato, let's start with you because you were kind of talking about a storyline. Which is your favorite? Do you have one that's your favorite?
I haven't experienced every. I mean, so there's a quest at the moment that I think came out. It was either for the 17th or 18th anniversary. It's been around a few years. Called Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, and it's one of the things that's there to help newer players or returning players just speed through content. Some of the rewards are permanent XP boosts, so leveling and everything you do is just that tiny bit quicker. And so one of the big things I've been was trying to do was go through that, but what Rhapsodies does is it touches upon each and every DLC and add-on and main storyline, and sort of revisits it a bit, and you get a kind of impression for it, but it requires you to go into each one. So I guess I've started a fair few of them, but I've only actually taken, I think, the original storyline. Me and Dino took out the Shadow Lord and then kind of put down for a bit. The main storyline actually switches subject matter there, depending on what your starting nation is, I think. So the Shadow Lord storyline then picks up in the Dynamis areas, which is a bunch of DLC from... Someone help me.
I think Dynamis was Chains of Hermathia, but
Chains.
I'm not positive. It was around that time that it came out, but it might have been. They still worked on the older expansions as they released expansions.
Yeah,
So I think it might have been Zillart content because it's related to the Shadow Lord, but it came out when Chains of Hermathia was out.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not positive though.
the weird thing is you find as you go through it, there's a lot of... Maybe it's just the order we went through it, because you start... These days, you'll actually pop the intro to some DLC or add-on content before others, which wouldn't necessarily have been the original kind of playing order, for lack of term. But then you realise that a lot of the storylines have these little interconnected points where the NPCs at the end of one storyline are actually the main subject in another DLC entirely. And there's a lot of little bits like that. Honestly, yeah, the ones that stuck out for me the most, though, were the Shadow Lord, because it felt like me and Dino so much content and getting to such a apex. The boss I mentioned earlier, which was in literally an apocalyptic endgame sort of scenario, and I think is an NPC. It's a set of NPCs that are mentioned at the end of the Shadow Lord storyline, so it all slowly weaves through, and again, it's this culmination of this huge arc we've been playing for ages. And it's some of it was storyline for, I think Wings, the summon avatar stuff, where you meet Kate Sith, and he's like in charge. He's not even an avatar himself. He's a bit different from the other avatars. But you actually meet him and chat to him, and he sends you off to do things. And there's all these cryptic hints at Atomos and other avatars that you haven't seen. Again, it was just really cool. Again, it's like these little drip feed hints of all Final Fantasy fans, like hardcore ones will probably like know, oh, I know of that summon. Everyone's waiting for Bahamut or Ifrit or whatever, and so far you hadn't had it. And then there's these little bits where it mentioned it, and you slowly build up and you go, oh, this is finally implemented in this game that they never did. And yeah, it just gets you really, really hyped. And
So
really...
Snowman has just said in chat, yes, Wings of the Goddess, wonderful expansion. You get to
Wings.
explore the world you've already been playing, but years in the past. It was mind-blowing for the time.
Yeah, and that's, again, it's a bit like asking us the zone questions. There's actually so much storyline content. There is... Each storyline, I'm sure, has their own really cool bits. At Her Gat has like these ancient ruins. You've got sort of weird war battle thing. Like the Dynamists are kind of like these shadow dimension areas where there's these just huge... They're areas you visited, but they're like nega versions of them, and you need to do them to get... There's some Shadow Lord storyline connected to it, but it's one of the ways you unlock certain equipment for your classes. So we grinded a fair bit of them, and yeah, there's just all of these little bits that are... Yeah, there's plenty of mundane bits, but
was the Shadow Lord the one that gave us 5,000 kills?
That the main storyline one, I think it's rank 5 Windy Sandoria and Bastok quest Shadow Lord reward was 5,000 kill.
And yeah, so that felt like an end game moment for us, and we've been working so hard towards like completing at least the main story, and then going on to the expansions. And then the reward was 5,000 gil, which I think that must have been set from when it was originally made, and maybe it was from when money was harder to come by. 5,000 gil bought. I spent 5,000 gil on 12 tacos in the game.
And those tacos helped us beat Fenrir.
They did, but it was still 12 tacos. So we saved the world. and I
Literally
bought
saved the
tacos.
world.
Yeah, it just we were just sat there like, there's got to be something else.
I remember walking up to we got the quest giver. She's at the top of this tower in, or at least for us, she's at the top of this tower in Windhurst Walls or Waters. Either way, there's this huge tower. It's the center of it's their headquarters for these people. And we'd been going up and down it to obviously receive the quest, hand it back in. And I remember beating the Shadow Lord and running back up there with Dino and just being like, yo, man, this is like the end of a new hope. We're going to get medals. We're going to be heroes. It's going to be amazing. And they were like, yo, you did a really good job. Here's 5,000 gil. On your way. It's not even the end of the main storyline, but oh god, that was
Yeah, like now 5,000. You get something in the game called a Mog Garden, and so you have a Mog house. And
Kale is in the Mog stream.
Ah, right, okay.
As we speak.
Okay.
And in the Mog house, you can put all your equipment, items. You store it all there. Anything you're not going to be carrying. You can change your job. It's just kind of like the main. It feels like a menu basically going in there. And when you leave, you have the option to go to something called a Mog Garden, and there you can harvest trees, materials. You can pull up fish from a pond or the sea. You can harvest rocks as well for different types of ore or different materials. So getting 5,000 gil now takes roughly 3 minutes, I think. If you've got it leveled up your garden enough, because you can buy books to level it up, and also there's a bit of luck to it as well about what you're going to pull. But yeah, so after doing all this, me and Tomato were really going for it, and yeah, 5,000 gil. It's a rough night.
I think at this point in the game, we had already started looking. We made a problem for, or at least myself, I think, by looking at the end game gear, because there has been, thanks to the number of DLCs, there's been several tiers of end game gear, and in order to make earlier end game gear, which is a very hard challenge to get, still relevant because they've released a new tier, they've often put in upgrades for the older set so there's all of these different things that you can get. And I looked on the auction house at the top level sword I could possibly buy, and it was in the swords category for blue. You couldn't even search by blue mage. It was the lowest item in the auction house, and it's a sword, and it was 72 million gil, I believe. So we had already started to get values in our brain about, okay, if we're going to get to endgame, we're going to need to farm some money and buy this stuff. And I currently have 2.5 million gil. I think once I had 8, didn't I? Did I get up to 8 million gil at one point? And then I had to buy a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And now so still saving up for that sword.
Yeah.
And you need a license to use it. So even if I can afford it, I need to then do more.
So hold on. So licensing, do you need licenses for different types of weaponry?
Not quite like Final Fantasy 12, but some of the very, very late game gear there's gear that is considered above level 99. Sort of like how we had to switch from regular levels to these things called job points and merits. The item levels go up and beyond that, and the very, very best of them, I believe you basically need to pay to use or grind to use. I'm probably misquoting it here because there are so many different bits of endgame gear, but
yeah, the end game parts get really confusing with equipment levels.
ultra confusing.
Like I'm probably not wearing now in game what would be the best for my level, and it's probably you get an auction house in the game, so you can either sell and buy items from the NPC shops or from other players. Like every player can set up a bazaar, so you can check a player and check their stats and equipment, and then go into their shop. But then you can also go into an auction house where you put items up for auction. And that tends to be the main place people buy most of their gear. Like if I spent enough time at the auction house now, I could probably find better gear for my character, but it's quite difficult to work out. Like I'm level 99, but there's maybe an item which is level 119 or something that I can equip. But then that might not be as good for my summoner as a lower level item because of how it works with MP restoration and different effects like fast casting, and so there's so many things to try and take into account.
In fact, with equipment, if we're talking equipment in particular, if we're talking meta, and I never quite got into this, what if you look things up, it can be very overwhelming because you'll get the most meta sort of answers, one of which is because you can set macros in game to do things, and every action you have in game has a
We have a
every
kale baby.
Baba. Yeah, every action you have in game has sort of like a time. So if you set a macro to be here's my Fire 3 spell or Firaga or whatever it's called, that'll be a move time. But what has no time is changing equipment. So what people would macro down, which is basically programming a series of moves in order, is they would, for every move they had, they would equip the relevant gear. So some gear has fire damage plus sort of boosts. So if you were literally had a macro for any fire spell, what that did is it equipped all of the best fire gear, fired the fire spell, and then immediately reverted back to regular setup of gear. And that was like the most optimum way to do everything. And so with equipment, you wouldn't just even, not even have the set that's the highest level. You'd have different sets, not just for different scenarios, but just for different moves. Literally, just different spells. It's crazy. It's literally crazy.
Swiddles just said in stream, I don't think my brain is smart enough for Final Fantasy.
I was going to say, for as complicated as it can be, you can do things in the game as well, like chocobo raising. So you can get an egg, and then you look after it, and eventually it will hatch into a chocobo. And then you can take it for walks, give it little things to do around the town, like deliver packages, and they will build up its stats. And you feed it, and eventually it will grow up into, like, the other thing you can do, like me and Tomato used to do this a lot, which is you can visit each other's chocobo with your chocobo. So our chocobos will play together. And then eventually they get to a full-size chocobo, and you can either use it as a mount and ride it through the game, or you can do chocobo digging. So you just dig up different items around the game.
Like hot and cold, yeah.
Like hot and cold in Final Fantasy IX, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also enter them into chocobo races. So
haven't won a single race yet.
No, still haven't won either. But yeah, it's like a 6 chocobo race, and it could be a mixture of player chocobos and NPCs, or you can race your friends, and you have like a jockey. You kind of it's automated, and you choose what food you're going to give it, and it takes into account all the training you've done as it was little, and every day you go back into the game and feed it, and
they have stats that you level by feeding it different things, sort of similar to 7.
Yeah.
You can do things like set something for them to do each day. So one day you could say, I want them to listen to music today, and tomorrow I want them to go and play with other chocobos, and the next day I want them to do a postal run for the town, and just loads of different things like that, and leveling up the chocobo, and that'll make them faster. So you do get the complicated side of Final Fantasy XI, and then those more fun sides of it.
if we're on the Chocobo, it's worth noting one of the sweetest moments, because Dino started raising his Chocobo, I think, a few days before me, both in IRL and in game time, because different things are measured by different ones. So we were doing that thing where we partied up and you could go visit both of your Chocobos together and you could tell them to play and do all of that stuff. And there was a point where Dino's Chocobo went up a size notch before mine. And we'd set them to sort of play together. And it was actively different because it was younger and older Chocobos. And there were like little bits of dialogue saying like, your Chocobo looks up to Dino's like it's an older brother, and little things like that. And it was just like the sweetest little thing. I was just like, so it's so heartwarming. Like anything in this game, it's still quite an investment. So as much as we could moan about, you've got to log in every day and do this thing, it does pay off because it's so satisfying.
Yeah, with the Chocobos, you do have to log in every day to feed them and take care of them. You can set, you can like pay a Chocobo handler in the game, which is just another NPC, and you can say, I want you to do this tomorrow and this the next day to stop you having to go in every day. But some
that's
days,
another thing you have to set in advance. So
yeah, and then also there's events that happen sometimes. So it will say like, oh, your Chocobo's found something, or a cutscene will play, and it'll be of somebody who's lost a Chocobo, and doing those extra things on those days that those events happen, then affect your Chocobo stats.
And they give you Chocobo abilities.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
can be used in hot and cold, and I think racing, but I didn't really unlock many.
But yeah, we must have played it for about 50, 60 days straight, I think. I mean, not like all day or anything, but like every single day we had to log in, like doing like dailies on a phone game or something like that.
Just logging in and make sure we did XYZ. Like feed the Chocobo, go to your garden, sell loads of stuff to get a bit of gil. For me, Alduin farming stuff. Bait, is it? I wanted gold. I wanted bait because I wanted to continue the quest, but also it's the Mog Garden books.
And then with that as well, you can also so your Chocobo, you can have another egg. So you can sort of, as one gets too old for what, and then the game says that they go to a farm, which I'm sure we all understand what that means.
You can still see it. You can still use it as a mount. It's still there.
Yeah.
Officially.
I think Tomato ate his, but that's a story for another time. But you can get different colours as well. So you start off with the normal yellow Chocobo, and then you can get like a red or a green, or like the tips a different colour. So yeah, there's a lot of customization to it as well. And also apparently there's items you can just paint them with, which is a bit weird, but
okay, well that is something. There's so much. We've currently Kale has had to swap computers because his wasn't charging. So I've currently switched off all of the videos while that may fix itself. We'll see how it goes. And also welcome on in Waking as well. And yes, Pursuitl, that sounded like something that we might actually be interested in. Apart from I would have to have lots of money to pay for somebody to look after the Chocobo, because I definitely can't do a daily task. Snowman also said a while back, Final Fantasy XI is definitely not a game for everybody, but if you've got people to play with and they can either teach you or learn together, it's an extremely rewarding experience, which is what Strife is about to start doing with Dino and Tomato and Kale. It
is extremely rewarding.
As he ventures through the installation of the game in the first place. That's a hurdle in itself. We'll move on to the next question, because we've got quite a few questions, and we're probably not even halfway through. I'll just remind you guys in chat, if you have any Final Fantasy-based questions that you would like to ask these guys on with us tonight, all you have to do is the channel points command. There's a channel point command that is only 50 points, so you'll already have enough points to do it. where that way it gets logged in the system so I can go and read it when we come round to those questions. So my next one is for Dino, which is actually asking, Final Fantasy XI has some expansions. Are you able to talk us through what they are? So how many expansions are there, and what are they?
Well, first of all, I think Kale's back, so we better stop talking about all that stuff we just said about him. As a tomato. Just yeah. Expansion-wise, there's so back when I first started, I picked up two expansions, which were Kings of Promethea, Rise of the Zillar, and then just maybe about a year later, the third expansion came out, and I think that was the Treasures of Art Huracan.
That's when I got it.
Yeah,
back in the day is when Treasures, because that had Blue Mage in it.
Yeah, it gets a bit out of control after that point. There's so many expansions that came out over time. You had, I think, Seekers of Alderlin was the fourth. Is that right, Cal?
Yeah, we had Zilart came out with launch, then Chains of Mathia, Treasures of Argon, Wings of the Goddess, and then
I think
there were a
Alduin's
bunch
the
of mini
last.
campaigns, like mini expansions.
Yeah, so like now when you log in, you can see on the right-hand side there were about 6 other mini expansions, all with their own quests, items, unlocks. Some
Usually
of them did,
cities with factions.
so some of them did things that were job specific as well. So for like my summoner class, one of them unlocks Siren as a summon. One of them unlocks Kate Sith as a summon. And then it introduced all this new gear you could get as well. This breaking level 75 up to 99 and items. I think generally for those first few expansions, I think mainly me and Tomato we got through a few of those, and I think Kale's probably done all of them. It's just these later mini expansions I think all of us are pretty new to.
Do you know?
We've
Sorry,
done
what
drips and
year
drabs
was
of each.
What year was the last expansion release?
The latest add-on was like last year.
Yeah, let me just search the back of my brain, Google.
Because they're still releasing content for it. They just released chapter 8-2 of thingy content.
Thingy content.
Well, literally, basically, they're still adding story. It's the one Kale mentioned earlier that started, was it a couple of years ago? And they were meant to be dropping chapters monthly.
Something of Valor or
something of Valor.
I don't know. ROV, something like that. I don't know. I don't remember what it's called.
Everyone in chat
ROV
is
Rhapsody of Vanadil.
That is Rhapsody of Vanadil. Yep.
And that's been done. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Because I can finish it now. I just need to finish out.
I know a Dueling started after they shut down the PS2 and 360 service because they finally pushed the engine past where the PS2 engine could run.
Ah, that's interesting. So does that mean it's no longer on PS2 or Xbox 360? People can't play it on that. Right. I see.
Even though 360 when it launched was super cool because it was like they redid all the textures and everything, so they like brought the game into like a new era. I got a 360 just to play 11 on it.
Yeah, I got it on 360, and I got it with the little keyboard for the controller. Do you remember the little one that plugged at the bottom of it? It was so funny. I put giant thumbs. I couldn't type anything in that game.
Okay, well, moving on from the expansions. Well, still talking about the expansions. Which was your favorite expansion, Kale?
For me, it was Chains of Mathia, even though in normal me fashion, I didn't finish a single expansion. I finished the main game and I did like all of the rank 10 missions for everything else, but I have yet to do all of the missions for all the expansions because they required so much teamwork. I actually went in and tried to do the current Rise of the Zilart mission that I'm on by myself earlier today. And it's the Archangel fight, if you guys remember the Archangel fight. And I just walked in, I summoned my trusts, and I got destroyed within like 2 minutes. Still by myself, I can't do it. So it requires people and friends, and a lot of it was really miserable to get through, especially Chains from Mathia instituted these level caps in areas. So there are certain areas that you have to go to, and you are limited to like. In this one place called Fomuna Aqueducts, are a bunch of these creatures that can see you even if you're invisible, and they can.
Oh no.
Oh. We may have lost a Kale. But at least it's a perfectly adequate freeze.
Yeah, Kale did mention about needing friends for that. Don't worry, Strife, you don't need friends for this part of the game, so you'll be fine. Just a little dig there.
You'll be safe, Strife.
You'll be fine.
Paul was saying you need to kill the Taru ASAP. Is that something that you think Kale needs to do? Is that what he's missing right now?
I'm a Taru. Get out of here.
Tomato, yeah. So the different, you've got different races in it. The Tarus are the really tiny ones. And then
Superior
you get, like,
race.
Yeah, ish. But then you get the human, or you get the Galkas, which are huge. One interesting thing is that when Final Fantasy XIV came out, they reused the
Taru.
character types. So you have like a form of a Galka in it, don't you? And a form of a Taru.
Yeah.
They've just changed the name, but I think it's meant to be some sort of link to 211, or is it meant
There
to be
is, I think,
I haven't played the
Shantoto,
14.
who has an add-on, so it's not a full DLC, but it's like a little storyline with its own set of quests, but it's not as full. I think each DLC added something huge, like, classes, jobs, a whole new city, a hub. These add-ons were purely just like, go here, bit of story, go there, do a bit of story. Shantoto, I believe, goes to the world of 14. She's in it, I think. I don't know. I didn't get far enough in 14 to meet her, or if I did, I forgot. So there are links.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my favorite DLC was probably the Treasures of Art Ergen. I can never pronounce any names in this game.
It's
But that game added pirates. How can that not be the best DLC? Pirates, and you also had
Blue
another
Mages.
class. Well, yeah, you had the pirate class was called Corsair, and you have dice, and rolling the dice gives your party different benefits, like attack up or magic up, things like that, higher defense. But they also get a gun. That was pretty cool for the game. And then was that the one that added blue? Yeah, blue mages.
Yeah, Blue
And
Mages are exclusive to that.
yeah,
Because that's the old continent, where before... I mean, it's still considered Vanadil, isn't it? But before everyone came to the current continent, there were lands to the east, which are Ata, Ogan, and all of that. And is that when they introduced Samurai as well, maybe?
I think Samurai came a little earlier.
Okay.
I could be wrong. But yeah, the other one they added was Puppet Master, which we still haven't tried, and I keep saying I'm going to try it one day. But you get a little sort of robot puppet that you have to get different parts to build him, because you unlock them and get them from different rewards, and then they become the sort of character that fights for you. And they play like the story. We've done a lot of the story of that DLC because Tomato's class was Blue Mage, which was unlocked in that.
And I needed to do storyline content in
Yeah.
order to just unlock my things.
And you see a lot of like the different the new characters. They did quite a good job of introducing them through the cutscenes and through the missions in that DLC. And again, it's not just something that pops up and tells you this is the new job and this is how it works. Your missions are all like about visiting like pirate coves and fighting pirates and meeting blue mages and going through these different like these different trials for blue mages. That's right, isn't it? And then in the main story, like one of the NPCs that you deal with has these automatons, which are the puppets for the puppet master class. So you see a lot of everything, and it's just a really good way of teaching you what you've just unlocked.
And if you go through different parts of that DLC. So going through the Blue Mage stuff, I saw some. There's the main storyline of At Ergan or Treasures that everyone will experience, and the Puppet Master NPC with. Did they have more than one puppet at the same time or something?
Yeah, I think they've got 2 in there.
They've got 2. They were throughout, but when I did my Blue Mage quest line that not everyone needed to do, there were still little connections to that, and the crossovers happened where you would see those. You'd get a little bit more insight into those NPCs, whether they were being manipulative or really good, or they do a lot of. It's kind of odd for an MMO to do this, I think. But I think 14 does some of it as well. But I feel like this is a bit of an oddity in MMOs, where instead of a dialogue box and it's like, here, read this, click OK, accept quest, move on. Like, wow, it's very easy to skip so much dialogue because you're just going, yeah, accept, next marker. Yay.
We've got a Kale back.
My power has returned. This is the internet.
Yeah, as opposed to that, in 11, I think, to a degree 14, you actually have cutscenes, where it is like, it might not even be anywhere your character is. It might cut away entirely and show you some dialogue for some other characters, because that's what's pertinent to the storyline at the time. And not many MMOs do that. They tend to focus on your perspective. And so you do get lots of little different views of things going through these.
I've got a quick question actually from that. Out of the 3 of you, have any of you played Final Fantasy XIV a lot?
Not a lot.
Yeah, no, I've played maybe a few hours in the one of the starting towns, or the starting town. I know nothing about it really. I fired it up. I did a couple of the early introduction missions, and it feels like a solid MMO. I know that it's a bestseller and it's usually popular. I think I went into it thinking it was going to be another Final Fantasy 11, and like Kale was saying earlier, 11 feels like a single player game with online being an optional thing when you get a party of people together, but it feels very focused on you, whereas 14 had that more classic MMO formula to it, setting your hotbar with all your commands, running a certain routine, going into
Here's your quest markers.
Here's your quest markers. Go to A to B. Yeah, and I actually, when 14 first came out, I've still got it here. I got the collector's edition of the original 14 because it was released and it was really bad, as a polite way to put it. So they destroyed it all with an update called Realm Reborn, where a meteor hits and it destroys the world and everything's remade essentially. So, but I played 14 when in that first run before they did that, and that was even that was horrible. It was
server lag was so much fun. There were insane amounts of server lag, and they needed everybody to have the highest NPC you could possibly buy at the time if you wanted to play it at like a stable frame rate. So they made it with these extreme demands on your computer, and then they didn't have the server infrastructure for it. And then they canceled the PlayStation 4 version until they announced A Realm Reborn, which, like Dino said, literally destroyed the world. And then A Realm Reborn now picks up 5 years after the original game did.
Yeah, people don't know this, but Kale actually wrote most of the story for Final Fantasy 14
original.
Yeah,
14. And they destroyed it. They destroyed it.
Probably why he doesn't talk about it.
I've gotten to like about level 40 on A Realm Reborn. I did play it very briefly back in the original. I have spent like a good few hours in 14. It very much there's a lot of really good goodies in there. But as Kale was saying earlier, it's very much more fan servicey. It feels like they go, "Hey, remember that thing from Final Fantasy V? This month you can look at this in HD and do
Yeah,
this
that's
thing."
one thing that I think does
Which-
entice me to want to play 14 is just smashed everything on my desk. Is some of that fan service, so you can get mounts like the Regalia from Final Fantasy 15, the car,
Mhm.
and you can get different mounts from different series of games. And I know that Gunblades, they've added Gunblades into it from 8. So there's a ton of stuff I would love to go in and try, but then there is the fact that some of it is like timed, so I don't think you can actually get like that Final Fantasy 15 car at the minute. I think that maybe rolls around every, I don't know, year or two,
Once
or
a year, yeah, maybe.
and I think
Yeah, right
some,
now they're doing.
I think some of it
There
sounds
are.
interesting, and I'm sure if I played it, I'd get sucked into it. But yeah, I think I do like that idea of some of those cool mounts that you can get in it.
But
Apparently, there's tons. I think
it's
Tomato,
sorry.
you had a whale, didn't you?
Someone gave me, I think, the whale. I think it might have been Demorty.
Mm.
Which is really, there are literally mounts for everything. There are so many things. If you're looking for an easy MMO, Final Fantasy MMO to get into, 14 is unfortunately the safer bet. But what you are getting is the standard MMO formula, as Kay was saying, with Final Fantasy kind of as a skin, where, you know, if you really want to, you can invest in some pay for currency and buy a few more upgrade. You know, it's got some microtransactions, it's got mounts, it's got all of the things you expect from a modern MMO. It's a lot more accessible, even though honestly I found it dragged because it subscribed to that formula too much, in that there were a lot of story beats that led you to a new area, because you'd get a huge story beat reaching an arc, and you'd fight a huge avatar like an Ifrit, or so, you know, you'd fight a significant fight, and then you'd move on to the next area, and it was like, talk to these NPCs, go skin some wolf hides, go do the same, kill 5 of these, all right, go over there, collect 10 of these, very MMO formula stuff. But I'd still recommend 14.
Okay. I was just wondering, just because obviously we're talking all about 11, and I don't really know you three for playing 14. I remember Tomato did play 14 for a while, so I just thought there's something that makes you guys go to 11, and you all just explained it in your own ways, why you will always be choosing 11 over the 2. My
Yeah,
next.
Not always, for me.
Yeah, Tomato got banned from 14, so that he has no choice. He has to play 11 now.
One thing you could say, I would say for 14, if we're going to mention it, which 11 has, like we were saying, it has the chocobo racing, and there's some really cool in-depth stuff you can go into. 14 does have a gold saucer. And
is it just like 7's for gold saucer?
it's not just like it, but you can chocobo race, you can play cards. There are events every 30 minutes or every hour that are all, they're not all unique, they rotate, but there's hundreds of them. So literally you can just stay there farming stuff. There's gold saucer points for exchanging things to get better gear, or just novelty items, costume. Like literally, if you wanted some online gold saucer kind of, it's undeniable. That is one of the big. If I was trying to convince someone to play 14, that's what. Just go, look, dude. There's a gold saucer.
That's usually where I get trapped in the game.
Yeah,
that's usually where I stop progressing in the story, and then I'm like gold saucer, and then I let the subscription lapse, and then I stop playing. So I try to avoid the gold saucer whenever I get back into it.
Also, that's why Tomato got banned. He did a heist.
They don't like you taking people's gil. I don't know what it is. It's not even a real currency. It's better than crypto. Yes, I can buy a chocobo mount with this. Like, damn.
My next question is written by Paul, which will probably explain what it is. It is, who was your favorite NPC and why was it Prish? Now, could one of you please explain to me who Prish is and why that is a question?
Prish. Well, we have her as a trust now, don't we, Dino?
Yeah, I think they added her in as a trust. I know that she's in the story a lot. I can't remember which DLC pack though that she can.
Matthew.
Yeah, it's changed. Yeah, I'm just double checking.
See, my favorite NPC, whilst the other guys figure out who Prish is, because we're all professionals here. But Shantoto, originally when I first played, was just somebody that was part of the Black Mage sort of job quest line.
In Windhurst as well, wasn't she?
Yeah,
She's kind
in
of like
Windquest. And she's an NPC that you deal with a lot, but she wasn't a huge character or anything like that. And then over time, she's become more popular, and she's now ended up with her own DLCs. She's in Final Fantasy Dissidia, the fighting game, crossover with Final Fantasy 14. So she's kind of become a big icon of the Final Fantasy 11 game. So that's probably my favorite NPC. And also because I'm in Windhurst, I have to deal with her quite a lot for a lot of the missions.
I'm trying to remember her name, but again, and she was an NPC I think you have to deal with for the main storyline of Atagan, but you also have to deal with her briefly for the Blue Mage stuff. And basically, she's one of the cat people. And
yeah, she's the one who operates behind the desk.
Yes, okay, that's it. Yeah. And
yeah.
You meet her and you're introduced to her like you sort of would expect in any RPG. Like, you talk to an NPC and they give you a token and be like, oh, you're looking for work? Yeah, you should check up with them. Yeah, everything will be fine. And you immediately walk into her office and she comes up with some crazy excuse as to why you owe her money for, like, breaking something. It's like, basically, she gets you into her employ, constantly exploiting you, and whenever you get credit for stuff, she's like, wow, I did all of that. I'll take all of this. And she's kind of infuriating, but I won't lie, she grew on me. Like, because by the end of that stuff, she is going like, yeah, you're all right. You're all right, kid. Like, you're genuinely like, you're about time I got some recognition around here. Like, because yeah, basically you're saving the world and she's taking the credit and talking to like the royalty and being like, yeah, that was me and my mercenary guild. You can thank me for that. And yeah, it's just great. She had a sauce.
Kale, do you? Oh, sorry. Go on, Tomato.
I'd say, and I don't want to spoil too much, but Bahamut, I guess.
Kale, who was your favorite NPC? Do you think?
I think it was Lion, because as you're going through the story, she's the first one that has like a unique character model. Like, everybody else has these generic models that you can make. All your character models can essentially be one of the NPCs, except for like Kids and Matt. Most of them follow this pretty standard cookie cutter thing going on. And then Lion's the first one that's like, I have this like long, crazy red hair, and I'm a person, and I don't look like anybody else you've ever seen. And she like inserts herself into the story, and she's like the son or like the daughter of like the big smuggler guy that you have to like get an invite to get into and stuff like that too. And then she ends up being like her own hero and stuff. But it was a really, really big deal when you first meet Lion because she was not like anybody else so far. Like I said, she very much stands out from everybody else. But I guess the NPC that I spent the most time with was my Moogle in my Mog house. So he was probably the coolest because I spent a lot of time just hanging out with him and chatting to people because there was no lag inside your Mog house. So
People in chat, do any of you have a favorite NPC from Final Fantasy XI? If anyone in chat is a Final Fantasy XI player, and you can think of what your favorite NPC is. Paul's disappointed because you all had different ones to Paul's.
There are still a bunch. I'm again, because of the amount of content and also the amount of time it's been since we all played. I'm sure we're neglecting to mention, if they're not our favorite, but honorable mentions. There are a lot of cool NPCs.
When I first played, compared to this time round that I've played, we have gone through it so quickly as well. So we've probably, I mean, I feel like I've taken in most of the story, but sometimes you're doing missions from different DLCs, and then you're going back to the main quest, and then you're doing a side quest, and then you're doing a job quest, and I think sometimes it's hard to pick up where in the story you are, who's who, and I think characters like Prish go between the DLCs. Is that right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a bit confusing to re-meet someone that you haven't met, or things like odd crossovers that happen because you're going ahead of where you should be. But yeah, especially for Tomato, he's gone from. I don't think you played it very much when it first came round at all.
Well, basically, I ended up stuck in whatever the really dreary place outside of Bastock is, I think.
Yeah, and then you went from that to like however many days we played it non-stop. So it's
like the first time I wandered into Juneau, which the city I mentioned, which was kind of a milestone back in the day. Like, it's not a starting city, it's a city you need to achieve to get to. And even playing it this time, there was a teleport I missed. So I kind of I did it traditionally, but still it was a bit easier.
We walked there together, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then somebody told us there was a teleport that we could have just taken.
Yeah. And we spent ages getting to level like 20 just so we could walk there. I got there, and immediately I got a cutscene for an add-on, which was for content that basically I don't want to say it's assumed you've completed the main game, but it's post-main game. You're not going to do this anytime soon. The first time you first arrive in that city, but that cutscene was dropped to me, and then it was literally months before the second cutscene in that DLC. I actually got round to doing it, and I had to be like, is this that guy who with the thing? Is that all to do with that? And I'm still uncertain because, months went by, like could be part of another quest. I don't know.
There's a way to watch old cutscenes, but you have to. I think you have to trade an item to a goblin footprint or something, and it has to be certain ones.
I thought you could review memories.
Can
you now?
Wikipedia for Final Fantasy XI. It's insane. We were talking yesterday, or you were streaming Final Fantasy XI yesterday, and you mentioned about the monster system, like where you can battle monsters.
And creation.
Now, I've technically played that game in and out for like 15 years, and I still didn't know that was a feature. And he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a whole system in the game."
I logged in earlier and found out there's a Mandragora minigame that's similar to a real world. Too. I literally found it today and was like, "Yo, this is new." Googled it because I didn't know how to play it properly, and I didn't want to rewatch the rules cutscene more than once. And no, that's been there years.
And there's other
didn't notice
like the where you can build your own mazes.
What?
In Juneau.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Kale would know every part of like how to do it. I don't know how you do it.
Nope, I haven't done it. It was something they added like right around when I was quitting because of college and stuff. And so I have no idea anything about it. I remember when they announced it, but I was like, okay, cool. This is more stuff that I'm not going to have time to do. So.
Yeah. We're gonna have to speed up on our questions because we've got quite a lot left. We've been live for 2 hours. So so the ones that I've got marked as everyone, I'm now gonna point to someone specifically, and unless someone actually has the answer. My next one is for Tomato, which is, what was your favorite music within the game?
There are a heck of a lot of very, very relaxing chill tracks from a lot of areas, but Run 4 is a theme that it's been in the game since day one, kind of thing. It was original content. That area's theme has always been like for me. But also the Alduin I mentioned earlier, the City of Alduin theme. There's something about it that I don't know whether it reminds me of like Final Fantasy IX. I think I've mentioned to you, H-Bomb, when I was a kid, it's partly the music, but also the fantasy of Lindblom from Final Fantasy IX was just like something weirdly. I wanted to live there if I could pick like a magical place to live. Alduin gives me sort of weirdly similar vibes, and the music, I swear, is part of it. It's just there's the little boom, there's the little bits of it that just make you go, home.
Lovely. Dino, what did you think of the crafting system?
My answer is 3 hours long, so let's settle in for the tale. No, I really enjoy it. So you can get something called a signet cast on you by guards in the cities, and that means that when it's active, anytime you kill a monster, you could get a crystal, and different crystals do different crafting things. So it's been so long since I crafted anything, but I'm pretty sure like red crystals are for cooking. They represent the fire. Green crystals are wind, and they are used for cutting up materials. So you could use them for like cutting leather. Is that right?
Yeah,
Um,
or wood, or
yeah. And there's about 6 or 7 different crystals you can get, and the more you craft with each one, you unlock further recipes of things you can make. So this time round, when I've been playing it with Kale and Tomato, I haven't done any crafting at all, really, aside from things that might have been required for part of the quest lines. But originally, I remember spending a ton of time just crafting in Windurst, and there would be players that that's all they would do. They would just stay in the towns, and anytime you'd go back to a certain area, there would be areas where people would just be there crafting all day, and they run their own shops from themselves, um, and then they sell the higher level gear that you would need to craft forever to make yourself, or pay a fortune for at the auction house. And usually it'd be maybe a little bit discounted, but yeah, it feels like it's a robust system, um, especially with things like the cooking. So different foods give you different stat benefits. So there's so many different types of meals you can make that would help each job class. Um, I don't think I've ever done any crafting with like the dark crystals or the light crystals. Um, I'm not sure if you guys have done any.
I've done some
So
fire crystal stuff and some
light crystals, I
smelting.
think, are actually used for crafting. Dark crystals are used for desynthesizing, so you can deconstruct things, and you have a chance of losing materials on the other end if it fails. So
There
you can
is
lose the item that you started with, and you can also only get a few items, not all of the items that it's made from.
There's also something, and yeah, I think it's one of the things that hasn't been modernized very well. We've mentioned before, like there's XP boosts now and things like that to streamline it for more modern or returning players. They haven't really, as far as I can tell, provided anything to streamline crafting, and it is a long, long, slow grind. So the people still doing it are doing it. They're quite dedicated, and I weighed up doing it, having played recently, because it's actually a requirement to make certain things, and there's a thing called a high yield result. So if there's a crafting recipe for a very powerful blue mage sword, and you either make the base sword, which is all right, it's good, and you can upgrade it. But there's also a high yield result, which if you're particularly good at crafting, there's a percentage of making the fancy version. And so not only do you have these people farming and grinding to get their skill up to this point, they're then repeatedly farming and grinding to get the high yield results of very specific recipes to sell or use. And then it's very time consuming. That's what I'd say.
It sounds it. It certainly sounds it. Kale, Final Fantasy XI has a limit break type ability called the 2 hour, which is different for every job type. Which do you like using the most?
So I think it's 1 hour now, but it started out as a 2 hour ability, but I think they lowered it down to make it so you can use it more often. It's less punishing. Because I mean, for instance, Black Mages is called Mana Font, and it's, to me, it sounds useful, but it's one of the most ineffective 2 hours you get later on, because you have a minute to use all of the MP you want. Nothing costs MP, no spells cost MP. But later level Black Mages, if you use your high level spells, they take 30 to 45 seconds to cast. So you can use one, and that's it. So to me, I think the most useful was Ninja, because of how punishing the game was, because it allowed you to kill yourself, and you did a percentage, like proportional to your current HP, you do damage to the monster, but you also die. But when you die, you don't lose experience. So you don't have any negatives to dying. So if you know that you're going to die in a battle, you can just kill yourself instead, so you don't lose the experience, so you don't de-level. Or if you need to get home in it really quickly, you just go out in 2 hour, and it was a quick way to get back to your home point without having to. It wasn't easy to warp before. Now you can just have like scrolls of instant warp or rings of warping and stuff like that. But before, it was, you had to find a Black Mage who was a high enough level to warp you back to your home point. Or make it back to a place to get home again, like on your own. So for Ninja, it was just a super easy way to get home with no downsides. Then there was the most ridiculous 2 hour in history, I think, was Dragoon initially when it came out. Because Dragoon was like tooled around. You have this like cool dragon companion that you can go around with. And it gets like abilities and learns on its own. And it's really supposed to be like your buddy. But initially, Dragoon could only ever summon this thing with its 2 hour ability. So if it died while you were out in combat, or you zoned somewhere that you weren't allowed to have your Wyvern or something, you lost it, and you couldn't get it back until your 2 hour was back up again. So they eventually patched that out and fixed it, so Dragoon was less worthless. But Dragoon was the butt of for a long time as being the worst class in the game. So because of its 2 hour ability.
Summons has got something similar. So with summon classes, when you summon Ifrit, Shiva, any of those kind of standard summons, they follow you around and they stay with you whilst you're outside in areas that you can battle. And they will have their own commands. But then you have, I think it's 3 summons which are locked behind your 2 hour ability. So if I want to summon Odin, Alexander, or I don't know who the third one is because I haven't unlocked them yet.
Bahamut?
It could be.
It might be.
Locked behind the 2 hour ability. So once you use that ability, you can summon them once. They appear, attack the enemy, and then they go. And Odin does his classic attempts to chop them in half or deal high damage. And then that's it. You can't summon him again for another 2 hours. So that's a bit of a pain. They kind of make it, because that's the only way to get him out into a fight with that ability. That's probably my favorite 2 hour ability, just because it's the only way to see some of your coolest summons.
Similarly, the Blue Mage one literally just enhances your next cast of a Blue Mage spell, and I guess I don't think I ever managed to pull it off in a significant combat scenario, because we were too busy doing other things and just going, survive, 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 do everything you're meant to be doing. But the best moment for me was when I unlocked a blue mage spell called Cannonball, which scales with your defense. And I also had several blue mage skills that stacked my defense. And I think it was one of the first times I was using it, and I stacked all the buffs. Then I went, oh, I'll use my 2-hour ability, see what it does. Cast Cannonball. And it just suddenly went like, you've done 16,000 damage. And I went, what? Like, literally beyond thousands of what I'd done before. Like, game-breaking values.
Hmm.
Oh, should have probably saved that. All right. Cool. Yeah. There are useful ones, though.
Well, from that, does anyone have any memorable moments from using their 2-hour? I mean, Tomato has kind of just answered that. That's his memorable moment.
Once I had a friend who rallied together his other friends, like all of us got together to fight Hydra, which was a big, multi-headed dragon from Ut-Urgen that can attack from multiple sides. Like it can attack multiple people at one time because it does damage because it's so large. And it was a big deal to fight him. I was like level 60. And he recruited a bunch of people who were like level 50s and stuff, and not everybody was 75. And so we went in and we fought this dragon, and I think some of us were on ninja, and so we went in and just basically killed ourselves in front of this dragon on purpose with like the ninja 2-hour ability and stuff, in front of people who were actually there to like. You had to claim this dragon. It only spawned every like 72 hours or something. So you had to know when it was going to be there, plan on being there, and so my friend like was there and got it, and we all killed ourselves in front of these people who were actually there seriously to actually do the fight, and they just sit there and watch us all die and kill ourselves in front of it, and it was funny. It was just a great time, and it was just some of the dumb stuff that you can do in the game that wasn't for anything, and the ninja 2-hour ability let it happen and made it so that way it didn't really affect us in any way, shape, or form. So.
Dino, do you have a memorable moment using the 2-hour?
I can't really think of anything that stands out. So for me, the warrior, it was Mighty Strikes, the 2-hour ability for
Yep.
warrior.
Yeah, Mighty Strikes.
And it's probably got me out of a few like rough situations towards the end of a fight, just kind of like quickly finishing up before I got killed. I feel like 9 times out of 10 though I cast it too late and died. And for the summoner, yeah, it's just like I was saying before. It's sort of the only way to see your more powerful summons, and they do look really cool. You spend so much time as a summoner looking at Ifrit, Leviathan, all your other summons because they follow you around, even outside of the fights. But you only get these glimpses of your other summons, which are really powerful. So, yeah, I mean, any time really using a 2-hour one with a summoner it's a nice time to see them, but I can't think of one standout time now.
Well, my next question has kind of been answered. Tomato, I've got written down, does Final Fantasy have summons? Well,
Kind of been lying this entire time.
Yeah,
It's not even a summoner class.
What's Tomato's favourite summon in Final Fantasy XI?
Honourable shout outs to Fenrir, because we had to do that multiple times. So, for a start, in order to just fight Fenrir, we had to beat all of the other ones, didn't we? At least the base summons.
yeah.
And Dino was unlocking them to use them. And then we found out that you could use Fenrir as a mount. And we both like doubled down on wanting it. And we had to go. It was so cool just going through all of the summons, because each one we had, like, it's sort of like fighting Matt. None of them was particularly like, yeah, done. It was always like, okay, we need to pay attention here and properly fight.
Yeah, the summon fights, they set your level down to like a 20, is it, or 30, something like that.
Depends on the summon, I think, but
So there's only a certain amount of there's only a certain way you can really be prepared for the fight.
You can't OP yourself by leveling, and
but you need to go through all the summons in order, or you need to collect all the items from all the summons to unlock Fenrir as a fight. So yeah, it was a good time though going through those, but
yeah.
it was definitely hard work. Yeah,
And I've already mentioned the other three that, and purely because they have more ties to the storyline, and it was just so cool meeting and starting to encounter these plot points. But Kate Sith, Atomos, and Bahamut are all just fantastic. Anytime you get to interact with them or they're part of the story, just feels really cool. And I don't even think we've gotten to the end of that content yet. So there's probably some even more
there's
cool
also
stuff out there.
there's Diablos as well, which we finally unlocked from Final Fantasy VIII. He's got his own little storyline. He's looks really cool. I just find it so hard to use him in a fighting setting. His attacks are very much stat damage. He's got a couple of attacks, but mostly he will apply negative effects to the enemy. So I don't get much chance to get him out in fights, but he looks really cool.
Lovely.
Yeah, that was he's a dream walker
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, he has his
He's-
whole thing.
He's
He's got a
pivotal
very
to
unique
one of the story plots too, but
Yeah.
I think it's Promathia that he's part of, and so he was the summon that came out with the Promathia expansion, but like a year or two after Promathia came out.
Kale, did you ever put serious effort into getting a relic or mythic weapon? If so, how did it go?
No.
Have
I can
any
feel
of
this
you?
one.
Yeah, when we had the questions, this was originally for me, and I was like, I haven't done this. I was like, if one of us has, it's probably Kale.
I wrote down notes for it though.
I
So
started.
mythic weapons weren't really a thing back when I played. They're relatively new to the game. After they expanded the cap to 99. So with 75, they took a lot of coordination and time to do. Mainly money, because you had to do dynamis to get not only the weapon itself that was broken. In order to fix it, you had to get dynamis currency. But typically when you did dynamis, you did it with a link shell. And the link shell kept all of the currency because they then sold it, so that way they could then fund more dynamis runs. So you would then have to go out yourself and buy the currency that costs hundreds of thousands of gil, and buy enough of it to then repair this thing multiple times and multiple times and multiple times, and do quests, I think, every tier, every step of the way, until finally you got to the point where you had a relic weapon. And it was like your jobs, or like your like
Unique
unique
weapon.
to that weapon type. Like every job doesn't just have like Black Mage has no weapon that they're excellent in, so there's really no reason for them to have the relic weapon. But you had to do like just a ridiculous amount of things, and Dynamis took 18 to 36 people just to run through at one time of the week, and you could only go into like each Dynamis. I think you could only do a Dynamis once a week too. Like you were on a timer for Dynamis. So
And
you
now
could
it's
only do it
once
once
a
a week,
day?
and you had to do it with like a group of people. So everything that went into it just to make it happen made it extremely impossible if you had a life to try to get a relic weapon. Now it's easier. I think you can go in and solo the older Dynamises, and the
Once a
newer
day,
Dynamises are where you get mythic weapons, I think. But yeah, I had a life, so I didn't have the ability to get a relic weapon.
It's
Unfortunately,
it's.
it was
I
a dream.
mentioned earlier that there's like mythic weapons, I think, and I'm probably muddling this up, came out around Autogat and 75. And then there's like relic weapons that came out at another point with different DLC. And then there's Empyrean weapons that came out with another one. But they all took so much effort to get that in order to stop your previous ones being useless, they provided ways to upgrade them. And if you try and Google what's the best weapon for my class in Final Fantasy XI, you will get a lot of different answers for different points at DLCs coming out and things. And there's one in I've done a lot of the Dynamis content. In fact, I did all of the storyline content for Dynamis. I still am nowhere near close to having all of the bits I need to farm to upgrade that relic weapon. And then there's the mythic weapon, which me and Dino have started to sort of dip into, and we immediately were off put because there's a 50 floor, it's either 50 or 100 floor randomly generated sort of tower. Everyone's different mythic weapon is a guaranteed drop from a very particular floor, or it's a random drop on any of them. The blue mage one is the final floor. You upgrade these weapons, they're not actually really worth... You can buy weapons that are better than these from NPC vendors. So you go to all of this effort to get one, and then it's not... You still don't use it. So then you have to upgrade it, and to start upgrading it, you need to finish this 50 floors of tower. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. That are one of the reasons I would probably say don't jump into 11.
I mean, I feel like Final Fantasy 11 is trolling you guys.
Yes, it is. It's 100% trolling us.
It has always been, it's less so now, but the culture has always been the devs versus the players, and we overcome everything that the devs throw at us. If you want to really see a good example of devs versus players, look up Absolute Virtue. It was a boss that spawned in C after you beat another really hard boss. There were 4 different bosses called jailers. And then once you beat the final one, you need to beat the other ones in order to fight the Jailer of Love. And once you beat the Jailer of Love, you're all hurting because it takes 36 people to do. Or 18 people fighting it, I think. And then you have more people on the outside to just swap in if people die and stuff. So you fight this thing, you get it down, you're low on HP, and then there's a 50% chance that a line of dialogue hits your screen after Jailer of Love dies, and then Absolute Virtue spawns and just destroys you. Because you had to know some really ubiquitous information, you could lock its abilities on certain days if you use certain abilities and stuff like that too. And it could summon 3 summons, and if you killed one, it would just summon him again. Pandemonium Warden was Ott Ergen's Absolute Virtue. But Absolute Virtue was the first one that was you guys are never beating this thing. Have fun. And then it gives you it's kind of it is the penultimate. It was the penultimate boss of the game. And just with the Shadow Lord mission, the things that you get from beating Absolute Virtue are relatively worthless and just for show. I did it. I have this item now, but it was not.
You caught all 150 Pokemon. Here's a certificate.
Yeah.
It's like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it could fully heal itself. Well, it had benediction. It had every 2 hour in the game up to that point, and it could use them multiple times at any time. So it could use the White Mage 2 hour and heal it and everybody else around it. Yeah, it was bad, but you can watch videos of people dying to it and just read about how awful it was.
Well, here's another one. Did any of you fight the worms when the level cap was 75? So, Jormungand, Tiamat.
We have fought a worm. Me and Dino did one of them.
Could you,
fun.
if Dino can remember, are you able to explain a little bit about what an event that these fights are for spawning? Is this something that just spawns once a week or something, or even rarer than that?
The one I remember fighting was a very, very, very rare item drop that you can also, if it's on at the time of day you log in, or the monthly event, you can maybe exchange your login points for. But you have to go to very, very specific areas and use a very specific item that is otherwise a rare spawn or rare drop, and then it will spawn ultra hard enemy. And I can't remember. I think Jormungandr or Jormungand was the one that I'm probably muddling this up, but I tried, and then I think me and Dino tried, and then we just died.
Paul has actually made quite an interesting statement there, saying that Square Enix got in a lot of trouble for Pandemonium Warden because the first time someone fought the fight lasted 18 hours and they still didn't win and they had to give up because they got sick. So that's very interesting and frustrating, I'm sure. Okay, so I don't know if you actually, I mean, is this a question that you can answer? How many times have you played through with different characters? I'm guessing it's not really a question I can answer, anyone can answer, because are you ever finishing, like, are you ever completing
Like
the
any
game?
MMO, yeah, you.
No.
And unlike WoW or some MMOs, your class picks aren't permanent. So for me, a motivation for starting a new character in an MMO would be like, I want to try going through as this instead of that. None of that's present in 11 because you can always do it. The only other reason you would is to sort of have that sensation of genuinely having nothing again, which I can see someone wanting to do.
I tried it.
You abandoned it though.
I abandoned it. I went back to my old character. I'm playing on my old character again, just because there is so much that I've done that I'm like, as I was going through it, I was going through it without wikis too. I was like, what is the new player experience like in 2021 without looking things up, with just using the stuff that's in the game? And the answer is it's miserable. Don't do it. Use FFX Cyclopedia and all the tools that are out there for you for information. Don't try to do it without help. And yeah, there's just so much that goes into it. Like, you have to get your sub jobs, you have to unlock everything, you have to break the level caps every 5 levels once you get after level 50. And you have to get your chocobo license so you can use chocobos. You need to get to a certain level so you can use mounts. And you have to do quests for just about all of these things. So all of it is time consuming. And there is so much to do just to get to a point where you're like, you know what? Now I think I can have fun for a bit. Like, you're having fun as you go through it, but me going back through it again, I'm like, I don't want to do all of this again. I had fun back in the day. I'm going to skip all of this. I'm going to go back to my old character again. So airship passes. Yeah, now you can get Gil really easily and just buy the airship pass. But before, you had to like go to certain places and get keys, and then turn in those keys, and then you would be able to get an airship pass for free instead of spending 500,000 Gil on it. But now you can use your sparks and turn sparks into Gil through like by selling a certain shield, and then you can get your airship pass. But like, so everything is much easier now if you don't try to do it the old way. But my brain was still set in the old pathways of doing things, and I had to adapt. And people kept coming into chat and telling me like, "Oh, that you could have done this easier," and I'm like, "Okay, thank you. I wasted 2 hours now."
And so even if you still Google stuff, like I say, it's not the most. The FF11 encyclopedia is the best resource, but even pages of that are out of date, or they still have the older pages.
Yeah, I
you'll
experienced that trying to get to Sky the other day.
you'll Google stuff like "How do I get to here?" and you'll get the old answer, and you'll start doing stuff for hours, and then I'm 100% positive both Chat and Kale did this to me, and I think the 10 Shodo license I needed, which was rank 3 Juno reputation, and a bunch of Gil and a few quests. I did that properly. I spent ages doing quests in Juno to get my rank up, and then I did the official quest line to do it. I could have just bought it on the auction house. But hey, what you don't know, right?
So I'm going to read the questions that we've had through from chat. because we have been going for 2.5 hours, coming up to 2.5 hours. I'd like to try and keep it at the 2.5 hour at this point. So let me see if I have... Why has my stream manager not updated? I should have some questions somewhere. Let me try and find them. Here we go. So some of them might be already answered. Let me just make sure. Mesmer made a funny. Spectre had asked, what is each of your preferred jobs roles, which we've kind of touched on. Strife has actually asked, is Dino as much of a menace in Final Fantasy XI as every other game? Now, we do know that Dino is quite a menace in most games.
As we said earlier, we were fighting crime.
We did fight crime. We solved crimes.
Yeah, I mean, most of the perps got away.
Yeah.
But
We
if
just-
anything...
All we were trying to do was retire, and they just kept pulling us back.
Yeah. And I've played several games with Dino now on. And as far as Ball of Chaos wildcard goes, he's actually been the most consistent in 11. He's like
focus.
almost lawful good.
Yeah. See, I'm like that in all games. He just doesn't see it. But Final Fantasy XI
because there's no MPK anymore.
I'm sure if Dino could randomly attack me in game, he would have.
If I could randomly attack Tomato and Kale, we would all play a lot less because they wouldn't invite me to play anymore.
Right.
Because I would be doing it constantly.
Mesmer's asked, why is Final Fantasy so expensive to play? So yeah, what is the charge for this one, 11? It's currently free, right?
I think it's currently free. There's a free trial too that anybody can do to get into it, and it's free right now until the end of the month for anybody who used to play it.
I think you can, if you're, let's say none of the events were on, you can probably pick up the complete collection for less than £20 or $20.
When it's on sale, I think it's 10.
Yeah.
It's like an $8.99 monthly cost.
And a plus pound or dollar per character extra. Yeah. And there's little boosts you can buy. You can buy more storage. Back in the day, it was actually a lot more expensive when I first bought it because I bought the DLC with the main game with up to Atogat. And like any game you'd expect, it was a full price game with £20 DLC.
Yeah, I mean,
that dropped on top.
That was the main reason I didn't go straight into it when it came out. I remember reading that it was coming out and all this stuff about it, and I just kept thinking I can't afford to do. I was like
monthly payments for a game. It seemed absurd back in then.
Yeah, you were buying the game every month just to play it longer. And I know that there was the sort of, by the time I got into it, World of Warcraft was out and City of Heroes and all these other ones. I started with an MMO called Guild Wars because you bought the game, it was an MMO, and then it was free. There wasn't a monthly cost to it. So I thought that if I tried that would kind of get me over this want to play Final Fantasy XI, and then eventually I just ended up playing them all. It was a bit of a nightmare. But 11 was clearly the best. I'm still with it, from my point of view.
My next question is from Wanzi. It's a good question. How long do you guys think the server will remain up and running for this?
Well, so they just did an interview with some of the directors of Final Fantasy 14 and 11, and also they've been doing interviews with like Square Enix's president, who is, I have different views to him on his and NFTs and everything, but he has made a point that Final Fantasy 11 is sort of a monument to MMOs. It's it was one of the first MMOs out of that scale, and I think it's just something that they can use to say this is it's the longest running MMO. It's still got people going back to it. It's still bringing in money. They add content each month, but the content that they're adding of extra missions, I can't see the cost of that dev team outweighing how much it's bringing in. But yeah, I don't know the figures or anything like that. But I feel like it'll be around for a good while. I honestly thought when 14 came out that was going to be the start, the end for Final Fantasy 11, but it's still been getting content. It's it's just had its 20th anniversary. So hopefully a little while longer, and then we'll all have to go to the private servers.
They almost remastered it for mobile. They were like really far into the process. We got some screenshots of like high def Windurst, and then I don't remember what the company was that was working on it. Just announced that they canceled it this year. Like it wasn't like big news. Square Enix came out and told us like we're making this on phones and stuff. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be pretty. And I've been watching it for years. And this, I think it was in like February. We finally got news that it was officially scrapped, and I died a little bit on the inside because I just want a remastered version of Final Fantasy XI so badly that I can play on something other than my PC. So I can play, anywhere would be nice. But
I mean, I've modded. You can mod yours to look a lot more modern these days, which I've done.
My computer can
I
barely.
can. But I was also going to say, with the theme of being trolled, I agree with Dino. I think it's kind of here to stay for a bit. Like, they don't have any indicator they're going to shut it down, basically, for something that is as they've had 100 excuses to shut it down by now, and they haven't taken them.
I feel like
most they've done is compress servers. So because servers had lower population, for instance, I used to be on the Rama server, and Ramu got condensed to Bahamut, I think, with a couple other servers. So there's a bunch of servers that have transitioned and merged with other servers, so that way they can keep the player population at a good average across all the servers.
Yeah, the only thing is that I thought with the theme of trolling, which is so prominent with this game, is that I thought the big announcement for the 20th anniversary might have genuinely been, and it's time to call a close to this chapter of Square Enix. Thank you all for sticking with us and resubscribing for the last year anniversary, guys. But we're closing it down next month.
It's a weird one. I feel like it's not on the chopping block, but I don't feel like it's. I mean, how safe is any MMO at the end of the day if it's not getting people in? But I just feel like it's in this kind of grey area where
the devs love it.
The devs love it, and it's making it's bringing people in, it's making sales. I think they can. Obviously, they also know the amount of private servers that are out there. I'm sure they look at all those numbers of people that they could potentially eventually bring back to the main game.
It's why WoW Classic has appeared, is because Blizzard were looking at the number of private World of Warcraft servers that were pre-Cataclysm.
Well, that was one of the rumors going around as well for the 20th anniversary, was that people thought that Square were going to make a classic version of Final Fantasy XI, which would have stripped out all the things that has made it more accessible to new players.
That's the opposite.
It was hard, but it didn't happen in the end. It was a bit of a shame.
Thankfully that hasn't happened. The last question I got from chat was from Snowman, which we touched on earlier with the crafting, but have any of you actually specifically ventured into crafting?
Smelting for a bit. There are some things that combine with... So one of your Mog House things is you can place furniture, including plant boxes, and you can use those to grow cuttings, which you can then use the results of in smelting, and then the results you smelt are almost always worth more on the auction house than if you didn't. So I thought briefly to do that. The amount of time it took me to go from like, you're level 1 in smelting to you're level 2 out of 350 or something crazy in smelting was enough to make me go, all right, I'll put that down.
Yeah,
they've made it better.
Yeah, there's certain things that they've made more modern, and they've fixed certain features, and crafting is still improved from how it was originally. I still don't think it's quite up to like what you would want in 2022. it takes a long time to level anything up. Because I use a lot of MP for summoning, I wanted to try and craft my own ethers to, restore my MP. And then when I realized how long it would take, I thought I would rather eat my own face than do this, and just port them instead. It's easier for me to get resources, to fight enemies or go to the Mog House and mine fish and sell those items to Gil to buy potions and ethers than it is to craft them and go through all that chaos.
But that's kind of what's good about it, in that it's like, if you really want to embrace the crafting, you can, and it is a means to an end. But if you really don't want to, you can. And I think this is very much modern Final Fantasy 11, not old school. But it's part of the modernization and ease of it is they give you ways of going, look, it's easier to farm Gil and buy stuff on the auction house than it is to craft it or fish. But you can still fish, and it's still quite enjoyable. Actually, fishing is one of the few
Fishing is the best craft.
separate crafts that is actually kind of fun. You feel more engaged doing it than any of the other ones.
Fishing is my highest crafting skill, and it will always be my highest crafting skill.
I have fishing up to 4, and I'm 100% highest crafting skill. Yeah.
Well, you can. There's a quest to fish up moat carp in Sandoria, I think. And if you get a certain amount of moat carp and turn in I don't remember exactly how many it is. It's a ridiculous number of moat carp. But if you do this, you get a special rod called the Lushang's rod. It's not unbreakable, but it is one of the best rods in the game. It's like relic weapon fishing rod.
You equip all fishing rods as it's got a weapon slot in your inventory, and you equip all of your tackle and bait as ammo. And you literally need to wield it and fight the ocean.
Yeah, but it was the hardest to break. It could catch certain fish that other rods could not, but you had to do a ridiculous amount of grinding of fish, like a very low level, easy to catch fish, in order to get this fishing rod. So anybody who had it was relatively legendary, like among fishermen, and so it had this whole culture to it too. Crafting was a really big part of the game initially when it came out, and a big selling point is that you never had to leave the starting cities. You could do the entire game just as crafting. So you could literally live in Vanadil if you wanted to as a merchant instead of being an adventurer. But then reality hit, and we all discovered that no, in order to get any of the stuff or make any money, you have to go out and do jobs. You can't just craft. You will not make enough money or get the materials you need to craft because everything costs too much. So inflation hit the game very quickly. And so selling things to NPCs, you can sell a level 1 sword to an NPC for 15 gil, or you can sell at the auction house for 2,000. Is about that's about what it looks like. And it's just absurd. NPCs buy things for nothing, and inflation is absolutely astronomical these days. But yeah, it's 10,000 milk cart. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, fishing. Best
That's
craft.
a lot. That's a lot of fish.
I think it's to do with Brexit. I'm not sure, but
Fishing treaties. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so we're gonna have to sort of round it up. ST did ask a question that I think was what we were already answering in a way. WoW Classic and RuneScape have been falling lower and lower recently. Do you think that'll happen to this?
Inevitably.
Yeah.
People drop off more than get invested in older games. Newer things. There's 14 that's a lot more convenient to drop into, to be honest.
And then you have all the private servers that are essentially leeching money from Square Enix at this point, because people want this classic experience, or a more tailored experience for them. Some of them have accelerated experience, so you can get through it faster and things like that. But Square doesn't get any of that money, so eventually private servers are going to be, and the desire for people to want to play certain ways is going to cause the original Final Fantasy XI, the official servers, to have to shut down. So. But it will still live on in those private servers. We will just eventually lose the main game. So,
I'm gonna skip all the way to our final question and ask each of you: what would you say to convince someone who has never played Final Fantasy XI to start it, to pick it up and install it right now, like Strife has been this evening?
I would say call a friend and get them to install it for you, so you don't see how archaic the installer is. And then, yeah, that's it.
I would lie to them or to mention all of the arduous details and mention all of the cool bits, and also say that you could play with me, Dino, and Kale, and it'll be super fun.
I think
And I've done this already with several people.
For me, like, it's just a big open adventure, so you get to explore and just there's no. I feel like after Final Fantasy 11, other Final Fantasy games felt a little more linear to me.
100%.
Because of how open 11 is. And like tonight, I mean, like, or today, I logged in just to kind of brush up my, remind myself of a few things. I've done nothing in the game all day, but it's still nice to be able to just walk around these huge cities or outside. And yeah, it feels very freeing to play that game.
I wrote in my notes that because I was like, I had to think about this question to distill it down to like a sentence. So it's a super expansive world that truly feels like a world of its own. It feels really alive in a lot of ways. And it's also a Final Fantasy game with a rich story that stands on its own.
Beautiful.
Also, HBOM was offered to give everyone 10 years worth of money to play. So anyone that signs up today with HBOM as the offer code, she'll cover all costs.
I'll make sure to cut that out of the uploaded file. Thanks, Dino. Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to have to wrap it up there because that's very long, possibly the longest podcast I've ever had. But it just shows you guys how much knowledge these guys have for Final Fantasy XI, how much they have to say about Final Fantasy XI, and also Final Fantasy XI, how much that is in itself. Like, it has so much, and you can do so much. Like, I didn't know about the chocobo breeding and raising it and things like that. That's a part of a game that would interest some people and not be interesting to other people, where they would just want to do the crafting, or some people just want to fight, and so it just shows that it has something for everything. So thank you very much. What we're going to do is, our usual, is we're going to go through each of them where they can talk about what they do. So Kale and Tomato are streamers, but Dino creates things for you. And we can talk about that a little bit. And thank you everybody in chat for being here. Thank you for your questions. So Kale, when will we find you next streaming?
For me, it's usually I wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I'm usually up at 6 a.m. Eastern and doing Ring Fit. And then right now it's 11 after Ring Fit. So really early in the morning for me because it's before the boys wake up. And that's like normal Monday through Friday is the goal. It's not always been that way right now because some days I need to sleep. But that's generally when I exist on Twitch. So
Tomatoes had to run. So yes, Kale. Did I spell you wrong there? I think I've written you right for the shout out.
Yeah.
It just says they were last playing and then it's empty.
Oh no, that's right. That's right. I was doing a walk with Zach and Theo.
And so okay.
It took off the category and there was no category for it. So I was last playing. That's right.
Now, some of you guys at home might not know this, but this entire scene that you see before you was created by Dino. Dino created the Final Fantasy Appreciation Society crystal in the middle. He created all of this layout here. He created the starting soon and, all of it. Dino's made it all. He's made all the emotes, everything. So, Dino, could you please tell everybody if they are interested in getting some emotes or some scene stuff or anything from you, how might people do that?
Hello, yes. So I, at the minute, my the main site I use is Ko-Fi, because you can take commissions through there. And yeah, I pretty much do a bit of everything, from, like you were saying, emotes, screens, animations, Yeah, a little bit of everything. I think just from years of using lots of different programs, I've picked up lots of different things.
Do you have the URL? Are you able to paste the URL? I'd open it, but it might crash the stream. I can't have Chrome when I'm doing this.
That one?
Well, yeah, that's one of them. That might work. He's also got a coffee. But that one definitely shows you a lot of work that he's done in the past to give you a good idea of the type of stuff you could get done. Oh, and there we go. And there's Dino's coffee.
Yeah, so that's the one that I tend to update more regularly because the website that I made a long time ago, it just takes a long time to go through and edit and change. Ko-Fi, I can just quickly upload a picture. And because I live in Tomato's wardrobe, it's just easier to do it from my phone rather than having to sneak out, use his PC when he's asleep, stroke his hair, sing to him. There's a lot to do in the day.
Is that why I keep waking up with a plait?
Shh,
Tomato. Okay, and finally,
My
Tomato.
hair's looking nice.
Tomato, where and when and what are you playing? When might we find you next?
The most consistent I can be is on a Saturday, and it'll either be at midday-ish or a bit later than, depending on real life things. I'm woefully inconsistent at streaming. Especially at the moment, but I am trying to do a few more random evening bits and bobs.
Are you currently playing anything in particular?
I literally just finished Citizen Sleeper, which I don't know if you caught any. I was actually going to
No.
recommend it to you. It's free on Game Pass at the moment.
Ooh.
It's a very unique game which has elements of traditional sort of storyline based RPGs with NPC boxes, and you can annoy the NPC by saying the wrong thing or saying the right thing. And it's on a space station. It's got a really cool sci-fi premise. And it's only like 15 quid stroke free on Game Pass, so totally worth it. But I just finished that. And I think I was gonna go, but there was something else I was gonna go on to, but I can't remember what it is.
Well, if you go
Final
and
Fantasy
check
11.
out, let's shout out Tomato. If you go and check out,
Don't do
well,
that.
yeah, there is Final Fantasy 11 if he's going to be doing that. Oh, you were last playing Valheim apparently.
I
There's
mean, Valheim's
that too.
H-Bomb, you've got to do yours as well. Who are you? Where are you from? Why did you kill that guy?
I'm here, and that guy came out of nowhere. And this is our Final Fantasy podcast. Thank you guys so
Listen to the
much.
story.
Thank you so
All
much
these years.
for talking all Final Fantasy 11 this evening. It is a celebration of 20 years of Final Fantasy 11, and it's amazing to me anyway that this kind of game can still have so many players on the servers. Thank you everybody in chat for being here. If anyone in chat is ever interested in being in any future Final Fantasy podcasts, just let me know, just contact me. We do all of them. It can be any Final Fantasy that you have an interest in. Also, if you're interested in being on a quiz, because I do need some quiz folk to some willing people basically to do a quiz for us. It's lots of fun. But I need to find some fresh blood. So if anybody is interested in taking part in any future Final Fantasy stuff, yes, Tomato.
I'm going to point in the direction of Discord, but I realise I shouldn't. I should just point up.
Yes.
Just go, that guy and the guy above him.
Both of them.
Yeah, those guys. Kale 3 and Kale 4.
I'm Kale 7.
Oh, sorry, don't know. Kale 4 and Kale 7.
Thank you.
Kill 3.
Should do a quiz.
Jesus.
But has
Guys, put
Kale
numbers
played
on your shirts or something?
Kale, have you played all of the
Like,
Final
they should be that easy to
Fantasies? Have you played
These
all
two
of
should do a quiz on 11.
Oh.
I think I played all of them. I haven't beaten any but 15, but I played
That's
every
not
single one
surprising.
except Crystal. What's the
Chronicles.
weird? No, not Crystal Chronicles. I played that. Remember we tried to play it together?
We'll save this
Crystal
for
Quest?
after the show. Okay, I gotta
Mystic
go,
Quest.
guys. This is the longest podcast
Okay.
ever. But thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. And we will see you again in the future next month for the next podcast. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.